LoveLore Library. Chapter 88. This wasn't the first time Mu Luiyue had brought up Princess Chongping in front of Han Ruoxue. Really? You've already promised me so many times, she muttered, feeling wronged. Mu Luiyue smiled. Didn't I get delayed by matters the last few times? How about this, I'll have Princess Chongping invite you to the Plum Blossom meet in a few days. How about that? At these words, Han Ruoxue's face lit up with joy. Luiyue, you're not allowed to make me happy. The Plum Blossom meet was held once every 3 years. A few years ago, it was organized by Princess Chongping to enjoy the plum blossoms and tea. All the participants were women who were personally selected by Princess Chongping before she sent out invitations. Most of the people invited were the daughters of Tianing country's nobles. Once invited, it proved that one had received the approval of Tianing's upper-class circles. Thus, many women yearned for this gathering. Before Han Kongan had been imprisoned, the Han family was considered a big family. Unfortunately, they were now commoners and couldn't be called nobles, so Han Ruoxue had no chance at all. Is it not enough for me to swear? You don't trust me that much? Mu Luiyue said, a crafty glint flashing through her eyes. No need, no need. I'll just trust you. Han Ruoxue was so excited that she didn't suspect Mu Luiyue's sudden invitation at all. Of course, excitement aside, Han Ruoxue didn't forget the purpose of this trip. She joked, actually, it's not that I don't trust you. It's just that you haven't asked me out for so long that I thought our eldest Miss Mu had forgotten about me. At these words, Mu Luiyue seemed to be in low spirits. She had just picked up her second cup of tea when she put it down again. She gave Han Ruoxue a meaningful look and said coldly, you still dare to blame me? I was almost tormented to death by that eldest miss of your family during this period of time. Han Ruoxue knew her chance had come. After a moment's hesitation, she said in a low voice, she's Qin Wangfei now. Mu Luiyue gave a cold snort. So what if she's Qin Wangfei? The Duke of Qin has to acknowledge her. I heard. Han Ruoxue started, then stopped. What did you hear? Mu Luiyue frowned, and her face turned ugly. She hated this kind of hesitation. I heard that she saved your brother. A while ago, the streets and alleys were all talking about how her medical skills are amazing and how she's hiding them. There were even many nobles who went to the gates of the Duke of Qin's residence to seek treatment. Han Ruoxue asked timidly. Mu Luiyue's eyes flashed with displeasure. After all, these things involved the assassination of her brother. Now the murderer had not been found, and the person who poisoned her brother had not been found. Her father had repeatedly told her not to make it public. Besides, Han Yunxi did contribute to these things, but she didn't want to talk about it. However, seeing Han Ruoxue's shocked expression, Mu Luiyue was displeased. Luiyue, is it true? Is Han Yunxi really that powerful? She used to be a good-for-nothing at home. Could it be that she had been pretending all this time? She's a genius. Han Ruoxue's face was full of exaggeration. Seeing that Mu Luiyue was unmoved, she continued, if that's the case, then we really underestimated her. This girl, before she could finish, Mu Luiyue couldn't take it anymore. She cut her off lang and cursed, genius my ass. Han Ruoxue hurriedly looked around in a panic. Eldest Miss, you don't know how to choose your words. If someone hears you, the main character of tomorrow's rumors in the capital will be you. Mu Luiyue's little face was gloomy. She pursed her lips unhappily. Han Yunxi only knows how to cure poisons. She can't be considered a genius doctor. There are many people in the world who know how to cure poisons. At this point, Mu Luiyue was still unwilling to give up. She added, what can she do to cure poisons? As long as there's an antidote, anyone can cure poisons, okay? However, Han Ruoshue was shocked. So your brother was poisoned? Didn't you say he was stabbed? There's poison on the assassin's sword. Mu Luiyue said again. So it's like that, but why are there rumors saying that she was locked up in the heavenly prison? Then she was released and the Supreme Court Chancellor changed. What's going on? Han Ruoshue questioned closely. Seeing the hesitation in Mu Luiyue's eyes, she knew that there must be a secret. Thus, she added, I also heard from a few sisters that Duke Qin was biased towards her. They said that Duke Qin didn't ask who was in the wrong and personally went to the heavenly prison to get her out. Duke Qin was biased towards her. When Han Ruoshue said this, Mu Luiyue slammed the table heavily. Nonsense. Han Yunqi doesn't deserve it. Han Ruoshue looked at her in astonishment, her eyes revealing a look of suspicion. Mu Luiyue didn't like this kind of gaze. She took a deep breath and said coldly, Here, I'll tell you a secret. You mustn't spread it out. Otherwise, don't come and see me in the future. Han Ruoshue hurriedly nodded. Luiyue, it's not like you don't know. From what I've heard, it's only in and not out. Mu Luiyue hesitated for a moment before nodding. She lowered her voice and said, Actually, my brother was poisoned with 2 types of poison. What? Han Ruoshue exclaimed. She was indeed very surprised. Sure. Mu Luiyue glared fiercely at her. Han Ruoshue hurriedly covered her mouth, indicating that she didn't dare to say any more. Mu Luiyue then continued, the first type was cured by Han Yunqi. Afterwards, my brother had a relapse and his high fever didn't stop. Han Yunqi was then convicted. Who knew that the second type of poison was the one that had been dormant for many years? She just happened to know how to cure it, so she cured it and was not convicted. As Mu Luiyue spoke, she deliberately lied in order to slander Han Yunqi. Actually, she just happened to know how to cure those 2 types of poison. From the beginning to the end, Duke of Qin didn't appear. Duke of Qin doesn't care about her life or death. Don't listen to the rumors outside. A complicated look flashed across Han Ruoshue's eyes. Of course, she knew that Mu Luiyue wasn't speaking the truth. However, the fact that Han Yunqi saved the young general probably couldn't be faked. So that's how it is. Ha, I didn't expect her to know how to cure poisons, Han Ruoshue muttered. Mu Luiyue was very uncomfortable when she heard this. She felt that Han Ruoshue seemed to be looking at Han Yunqi in a different light. A scheming look flashed across her eyes. She said in a low voice, Ruoshue, there's one more thing that I'll only tell you. You must keep it a secret. Of course, don't worry. Seeing Mu Luiyue's secretive look, Han Ruoshue was very nervous. She originally came to ask about the young general and didn't expect to find out more. If she had known earlier, she would have invited Mu Luiyue for tea. Mu Luiyue lowered her voice especially low. Ruoshue, your father's imprisonment actually has something to do with Han Yunqi. The moment she said this, Han Ruoshue was shocked. She stared at Mu Luiyue with wide eyes. What are you looking at? Are you dumb? Mu Luiyue waved her hand in front of her and pulled her closer. She continued, I also heard about this when I entered the palace a few days ago. Although I don't know if it's true or not, it's better for you to be careful. What exactly happened? Han Ruoshue panicked. I heard that the crown prince's illness was treated by Han Yunqi with the help of imperial physician Gu. Han Yunqi even completely denied your father's diagnosis, Mu Luiyue said. The emperor announced to the world about the crown prince's illness. He only said that Han Kongin had misdiagnosed the crown prince and that he had been ill for a long time. As for the truth, no one was very clear. However, what kind of person was Mu Luiyue? She already knew the truth. Of course, she wouldn't tell Han Ruoxue the truth. She would only add fuel to the fire and ruin Han Yunqi's reputation. Seeing that Han Ruoxue was in a daze, Mu Luiyue lowered her voice. Han Yunqi is up to no good. Han Ruoxue had always wanted to find a husband to marry into the Han family and become the next head of the Han family. With her instigation, Han Ruoxue would hate Han Yunqi to death. So you're saying that she was the one who harmed father? Han Ruoxue said angrily. Only then did Mu Luiyue return to her seat. She personally poured a cup of tea for Han Ruoxue. She didn't continue speaking and only nodded her head. Great, no wonder she won't let us visit father. No wonder the key to the Han family storeroom is in her hands. She's a married daughter. Does she still want to come back and fight for the family's inheritance? Han Ruoxue couldn't remain calm. She was panting with anger. How could she have the leisure to drink tea? She had to immediately go back and tell her mother about this. Luiyue, this is a serious matter. I have to go back. Han Ruoxue stood up and said seriously. Mu Luiyue had already achieved her goal. She nodded her head and reminded her in a low voice, you must not betray me. Don't worry. I'll go first. Han Ruoxue left in a hurry and forgot about the tea leaves on the side. These tea leaves were carefully selected by her mother. Every time she drank tea with Mu Luiyue, she would give her a jar. After successfully instigating discord, Mu Luiyue's mood improved greatly. She didn't care about the tea leaves. She drank a few more cups of tea before lazily getting up. She wanted to soak in the tea hot spring and relax. She thought that the Han family would soon find trouble with Han Yunqi. Princess Changping should have received her letter by now and would return to the capital in a few days. When that time came, Han Yunqi would definitely be too busy to find the traitor. That afternoon, Han Ruoxue returned to the Han family and went straight to Madame Li. Mother, Han Yunqi has the heart to fight for the family property. I think we should go find Madame Su to discuss this. No matter what, we have to get the storehouse key back first. Han Ruoxue was still anxious. This matter concerned her position as head of house. However, Madame Li was only a little surprised and wasn't as flustered as Han Ruoxue. So it can be said that she saved the crown prince. No wonder she was so arrogant. Even official Ouyang had to yield. Madame Su probably knows the inside story. With these words, Han Ruoxue was enlightened. If Madame Su wasn't afraid, how could she have let Han Yunqi get beaten up for nothing that day? But even if she has a backing, so what? How can a married daughter take the house key? This doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Han Ruoxue said seriously. Madame Li looked her daughter up and down, her eyes full of disdain. Seeing this, Han Ruoxue wanted to explain herself, but Madame Su reprimanded her, with your personality, how are you going to do big things in the future? How many times have I told you, calm down, calm down? When have you ever listened to me? Han Ruoxue finally calmed down and resentfully lowered her head. She remembered her mother's previous scolding. Madame Su definitely wouldn't let this matter go, so they didn't need to show their faces in public. Madame Li allowed Han Ruoxue to stand there with her head lowered. She calmly brewed a cup of tea and drank it. After a few cups of hot tea to warm her body, she said, "Did you find out what I asked you to ask today?" This time, the meeting with Mu Luiyue was mainly about the young general. Of course, Han Ruoxue didn't forget about this matter, but she didn't understand. Didn't her mother ask about the young general because she wanted to know how confident Han Yunqi was? Now that everyone knew that Han Yunqi saved the crown prince, then what did the young general matter? I asked, and it's pretty much the same as the rumors outside, Han Ruoxue said lightly. I said, I want you to ask for details. Madame Li said coldly, her fists clenched. If this girl in front of her wasn't her biological daughter, she probably would have been dragged out and beaten. Chapter 89. Facing her mother's sharp gaze, Han Ruoxue quivered and quickly replied. Mu Luiyue said that Han Yunxi wasn't treating the young general's illness, but detoxifying it. As soon as she said this, Madame Li's fists suddenly stiffened, but she didn't say anything. The young general was ambushed by an assassin, and the sword was poisoned. Han Yunxi happened to know how to detoxify and saved the young general. However, who knew that the young general was also poisoned by a slow-acting poison, and Han Yunxi happened to discover it and detoxify it, Han Ruoxue said. As soon as she finished speaking, Madame Li's fists suddenly loosened. She was dumbfounded, her eyes were wide open, and she was completely stunned. Han Ruoxue was frightened and quickly went over to support her. "Mother, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Madame Li finally regained her senses, but her expression was still a little stiff. She shook her head. "No, nothing. Go and pour a cup of hot water for mother." Han Ruoxue quickly went to the side to pour some water. Madame Li let out a long sigh and calmed herself down. She looked at Han Ruoxue's back, and her eyes were dark and gloomy. After a while, she calmly said, "How did Han Yunxi discover that there was a slow-acting poison?" Mu Luiyue didn't say in detail, so I didn't ask, Han Ruoxue answered. "How did the young general get poisoned?" "This slow-acting poison has to be administered slowly," Madame Li asked again. Han Ruoxue turned around. "Mother, I thought so too. There must be someone in the general's residence who wants to harm the young general. I didn't ask about this." Madame Li nodded and slowly drank a few mouthfuls of water. She casually asked, "Shue, did you deliver the spring tea I asked you to deliver to Miss Mu today?" Han Ruoxue finally remembered and lowered her head. I left in a hurry and forgot." Madame Li relaxed and asked again, "Those tea leaves aren't cheap. Where did you put them?" "I put them next to the tea table. Why don't I get someone to get them now and deliver them directly to the general's residence?" Han Ruoxue asked. "No need." Madame Li immediately rejected. "Forget it, just treat it as a gift for the fated person." Han Ruoxue was resentful, but she didn't dare to say anything even though she had made a mistake. "I'm tired and want to sleep for a while. You can go down," Madame Li said indifferently as she lazily leaned against the high pillow. "Mother, should I take your pulse?" Han Ruoxue was very concerned. However, Madame Li only waved her hand and asked her to leave. Ever since she was young, her mother had always been strict and sometimes even cold. Han Ruoxue was already used to it. "Then have a good rest." She poured another glass of water and put it aside before leaving. As soon as Han Ruoxue left, Madame Li immediately sat up. Her originally silent face instantly changed. It was as gloomy as the dark clouds in the sky. Even her usually calm gaze became sharp. "Men," she said in a low voice. As soon as he finished speaking, a female guard in black walked out from behind a screen. "Immediately go to the Heavenly Fragrance Tea Garden and get that thing back. Also, get rid of all the snake venom in the cabin." Madame Li instructed seriously. "Yes. This subordinate understands." The maid in black accepted the order and immediately left. Madame Li sat for a long time and her sharp phoenix eyes slowly narrowed. Han Yunxi, this madam has really underestimated you. You actually dared to ruin this madam's good thing. You're so capable. This madam definitely won't let you stay." Time passed day by day. Unknowingly, another 3 days had passed. There were only 15 days left until a month. After handing over all the matters to Mu Qingwu, Han Yunxi didn't stay idle. These past few days, she didn't leave the house and hid in the study of Leisurely Cloud Pavilion to research the 10,000 snake poison. She didn't have the 10 snake venoms on hand, but when she took samples before, she put Mu Qingwu's blood sample that contained the 10,000 snake poison into the detoxification system. The detoxification system would automatically copy the poison and replenish the poison library. Han Yunxi had been pondering over the method of poisoning these past few days. The method of poisoning would greatly limit the person who poisoned it. For example, some poisons could easily react with other things, weakening the toxicity, or changing the color or smell. Thus, they could only be put in clear water. On the other hand, there were also some poisons that couldn't be put in clear water, or else it would be easily discovered. Han Yunxi pondered that it wouldn't be easy to put poison in the clear water that Mu Qingwu drank. Moreover, the water and kitchens, as well as the servants who served Mu Qingwu, had all been checked. There wasn't anything abnormal. Could it be that she was mistaken and the 10,000 snake poison wasn't put in clear water? According to the records in the detoxification system, the 10,000 snake poison could only be put in clear water. Moreover, once it was concocted, it had to be used within a day or else it would change the color and smell. However, no matter how intelligent the detoxification system was, it was still something that humans had researched. In the modern era, there wasn't any 10,000 snake poison. The records in the detoxification system were compiled from ancient books. It had to be said that the detoxification system had very strong abilities in detecting poisons and concocting antidotes. No matter how strong the brain of a genius was, it couldn't replace it. However, the detoxification system was still very weak when it came to concocting poisons. Perhaps there was a way to mix the 10,000 snake poison in another solution without affecting its toxicity and without causing any changes in its color or smell. Or perhaps the poisoner had done something while concocting the poison. Without changing the toxicity of the 10,000 snake poison, they'd changed some of the properties of the poison, causing the method of poisoning to change as well. Although this possibility was very low, because concocting 10,000 snake poison wasn't an easy task in the first place. It was even more difficult to upgrade and improve the 10,000 snake poison. However, after investigating for so long without finding any clues, Han Yunxi had no choice but to seriously consider this possibility. If it wasn't in clear water, then it should have been in Mu Qingwu's food. Besides the 3 meals a day, Han Yunxi quickly thought of something else: tea. The people of Tianing country were fond of drinking tea, especially those in the capital. Every household would prepare tea leaves and drink tea from morning to night. Could it be tea? Han Yunxi muttered to herself. She was about to call little Qin Xiang over when she suddenly remembered that she'd left Qin Xiang at the Han estate to protect 7th young master. She could only personally go out of the hibiscus courtyard and find a page boy to help her gather all kinds of tea leaves. Unexpectedly, as soon as she returned to the courtyard after instructing the page boy, she saw a familiar figure in the distance walking through the long corridor. That figure was so tall and proud, with an imposing aura. Yet his gait was so elegant and noble. From a distance, his figure made everything around him dim, making it impossible to ignore him even if one wanted to. In the silent afternoon corridor, such a handsome, cold man walked elegantly alone. If the silent scenery was a painting, then this elegant, handsome man was the immortal in the painting. It was him. Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi watched and watched until her mind unconsciously wandered. Suddenly, the immortal in the painting disappeared. No. Long Fei Yi had suddenly disappeared. Han Yunxi recovered her senses, flabbergasted. Where did he go? She subconsciously took a few steps forward and looked around, but she still didn't see him. Han Yunxi recovered her senses and only felt that she hadn't seen this guy for a long, long time. The last time they met should have been at the tea house. She saw him, but he didn't see her. She had been worried that he'd peeped at the dregs that she'd hidden in the detoxification system when treating the crown prince. However, that guy still hadn't come to ask about that matter, so he probably didn't see anything. It was only the afternoon, but this guy came back so early. Actually, Han Yunshi was very clear on which day he came back, when he came back, and which day he didn't come back. Who told her to stand at the attic window and see the lights in his sleeping quarters? Where did this guy spend the night when he didn't come back? Why did he come back so early today? Why did he come back? Strange, she muttered to herself, but at the same time, she put away her curiosity. That guy had always been elusive, so it shouldn't be strange for him to suddenly disappear. However, just as Han Yunshi was about to continue walking forward, a low and cold voice sounded from behind her. Han Yunshi, are you looking for this prince for something? Han Yunshi jumped in fright and quickly turned around to look. She saw that the person who was clearly in front of her just now was now standing behind her. His tall and lofty figure was like a mountain blocking her back, causing her to feel an enormous pressure. Han Yunshi subconsciously took a step back, distancing herself from him to ensure her own safety. Of course, she was a little baffled. Your Highness, I wasn't looking for you. Then why are you standing here and looking around? Long Fei Yi questioned. When these words came out, Han Yunshi immediately felt awkward. She'd been discovered by him. She couldn't help but raise her head to look. Who knew that the moment she raised her head, she would meet Long Fei Yi's extremely disdainful and impatient gaze. What's the matter? This guy. She gave him a little bit of attention, and he really thought that he was the center of attention. Alright, even though he was indeed the center of attention, Han Yunshi refused to admit it right now. Why did he always look at her with that kind of gaze? Could it be that she was still so unbearable in his eyes despite all her efforts? Han Yunshi, who had always disdained to prove herself to others and didn't mind other people's gazes, didn't realize that she minded this man's gaze very much at this moment. She only felt that it was an insult. The angrier she was, the brighter the smile on her face became. She smiled proudly. It's nothing. I think your Highness has misunderstood. I was looking around here for someone else, not for your Highness. When these words came out, Long Fei Yi's originally cold gaze suddenly turned frosty, causing the surrounding temperature to drop by several degrees. Humph, let's see how arrogant you can be. Han Yunshi ignored the coldness in his eyes and said, if your Highness doesn't have any other matters, this concubine will be leaving first. As she spoke, she raised her chin and elegantly turned to leave. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Long Fei Yi spoke up. Wait, this prince still has matters to attend to. Han Yunshi abruptly stopped in her tracks and turned around, still smiling sweetly. Does your Highness still have matters to attend to? Let's talk inside. Long Fei Yi didn't even spare her a glance as he turned to leave after saying these words. Han Yunshi thought that he would go to the bedchamber, but who knew that this guy would actually head in the direction of Leisurely Cloud Pavilion? Is there really a matter? Han Yunshi was suspicious and hurriedly followed after him. Long Fei Yi caught a whiff of an unpleasant smell as soon as he entered the door. Even though he had never entered a woman's room before, he knew that a woman's room should be clean. He unconsciously frowned and followed the smell inside. When he arrived at Han Yunshi's study, he saw several bowls of black smoky liquid on the large table. The foul smell was coming from these bowls. Long Fei Yi looked around the study and saw that it was dirty, messy. As a clean freak, he hated this kind of mess. However, he didn't know why he didn't leave immediately. Han Yunshi chased after him. She didn't expect this guy to come to the study. Chapter 90. Han Yunshi knew that the study was smelly, so she smiled awkwardly. Your Highness, please go outside. The smell in here is a bit unpleasant. It smells just as bad outside, Long Fei said. Then let's go to the courtyard. Han Yunxi shrugged her shoulders. She wasn't the one who'd invited him here. As a doctor, she was a bit of a clean freak as well. But when she was focused on researching unfamiliar poisons, she didn't care about that at all. Right now, the study was passable, but in a day or two, it'd probably be dirtier than a garbage dump. Of course, once she finished researching, she could clean it up neatly and tidily. You're making poisons. Long Fei Yi had no intention of leaving. I'm just playing around out of boredom. Han Yunxi replied. Actually, the bowls of 10,000 snake poison on the table were the ones she'd extracted from the detox system yesterday afternoon and placed in clear water. Within a day, it'd become like this. What kind of poison is this? Long Fei Yi asked again. 10,000 snake poison. Last time, I collected some of the poison from the Major General's blood. When I had nothing to do, I studied it a bit, Han Yunxi replied. She wasn't telling the truth, but she wasn't lying either. But as Long Fei Yi saw it, she was lying. It looked like this woman was busy with Mu Qingwu's matters. But why was she hiding it from him? Chu Shifeng said that she'd found Gu Beiyue twice, but Gu Beiyue couldn't leave the palace. Long Fei Yi didn't expose her on the spot, but unexpectedly found a place to sit down. Then what did you figure out? Han Yunxi looked over and saw that he was still as noble and clean as ever despite being surrounded by filthy, smelly medicinal dregs. He was like a god who descended from the heavens, with not a speck of dust on his body. What did he mean by this? Was he planning to keep talking? Still haven't figured out anything. Han Yunxi replied indifferently. She didn't give Long Fei Yi a chance to continue asking. Instead, she asked, Your Highness, you said that you still have something to do. What is it? Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi had just sat down when he stood up again. His tone was so cold that there was no trace of warmth. It's fine. As he spoke, he walked past her and left the leisurely cloud pavilion without looking back. That's it. Han Yunxi was really puzzled. When she reached the door, she saw that Long Fei Yi had already gone far away. What did this guy come here for? It's always so baffling. Long Fei Yi seemed to be walking slowly, but in fact, his figure was constantly moving. In just a moment, he had arrived at the entrance of the bedroom. Chu Shifeng, who was waiting by the door, was astonished. Your Highness, didn't you come back long ago? One had to know that he had very important information to report. With his master's temperament, how could he possibly be late? Moreover, judging from his complexion, he didn't seem to be in a good mood. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word, but pushed open the door and entered the rooms. Chu Shifeng followed behind him, so he didn't notice his furrowed brows. Damn it, I was in a rush to see Chu Shifeng, but I slowed my steps when I saw her in the courtyard. I even went so far as to go to her room. He hated this kind of thoughtless behavior. He hated the feeling of being out of absolute control. Seeing his master stop, Chu Shifeng followed him and murmured, Your Highness, there's news. Long Fei Yi finally recovered from his thoughts. He tilted his head, the lines of his face cold and mysterious. Which family? Long Fei Yi's efficiency went without saying. When he'd gotten Han Yunxi's prescription from Mu Qingwu, he'd immediately contacted his acquaintances in the medical community to conduct a secret investigation. Your Highness, those 3 snake poisons are truly rare. Only 3 families have all 3, but there are more than 10 families that have 1 or 2 of the poisons hidden in their homes, Chu Shifeng answered honestly. He felt that something was off about his master today, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Long Fei Yi waited until Chu Shifeng didn't continue. He immediately turned to look at him, his cool face covered in a layer of frost. What else? Chu Shifeng couldn't help but shiver as he said timidly, "Of the 3 families with snake poisons, one is Northernly Country's Li Clan, another is Western Zhou's Imperial Pharmacy, and the third is Pill Fiend Valley. As for the remaining 10 or so families, we haven't had time to investigate them all. This subordinate has already ordered people to focus on Northernly Country's Li family. I believe we'll have more detailed information very soon." Learning from his predecessor's mistakes, Chu Shifeng immediately added, "Your Highness, 2 of the spies locked up in the secret prison have already starved to death. Only 2 are left alive. As this subordinate sees it, it won't be easy to get them to talk." Long Fei Yi nodded. "Make arrangements. Your lordship will interrogate them personally." Upstairs in the leisurely cloud pavilion, Han Yunxi was leaning lazily against the window as she stared at the mysterious palace nearby with furrowed brows. The page boy hadn't delivered the tea leaves yet, and little Chen Xiang wasn't home. She had nothing better to do, so she wandered upstairs to lean against the window and stare blankly. Soon enough, she saw Chu Shifeng emerge from his quarters, his footsteps hurried away as if he had urgent business. Just what was Long Fei Yi busy with all day? He held a high position in Tianing country. A sneeze from him could shake the entire Tianing court. But he rarely went to court to discuss matters, much less entered the palace. Could it be that the matter of the Northernly spies hasn't ended yet? Han Yunxi was lost in thought when a guard arrived with the tea leaves. In the hibiscus courtyard, all the servants were Long Fei Yi's personal guards. There wasn't a single servant girl. Long Fei Yi had only given her little Chen Xiang, but since the girl wasn't here, she had to share Long Fei Yi's bodyguards. To reply Wang Fei, the page boy from the kitchens delivered these. The guard carried a large pile of tea leaves as he respectfully waited by the courtyard door. He didn't dare to enter. "Help me bring them to the study," Han Yunxi shouted from upstairs. But the guard only replied, "To reply esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness Duke of Qin has decreed that no one is allowed to take half a step into the leisurely cloud pavilion." Han Yunxi gave a start, thinking she'd heard wrong. What? To reply esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness Duke of Qin has decreed that no one is allowed to take half a step into the leisurely cloud pavilion. Only then did Han Yunxi understand. She angrily blurted out, "Why?" The guard had no idea that Chu Shifeng had issued the order not too long ago. Actually, it wasn't just Chu Shifeng who'd seen His Highness sitting on the roof of his sleeping quarters that day. Nobody knew what had happened to him. "This subordinate doesn't know. I'll have to trouble esteemed Wang Fei to come get the tea leaves yourself," the guard said as he placed the items by the door and turned to leave. Han Yunxi rolled her eyes. "Long Fei Yi, you miser." Without a choice, she could only go downstairs to get the tea leaves herself. The tea leaves weren't heavy, but there were many different types. Adding them all together, it took her 3 trips to get everything. The page boy from the kitchens was very reliable. He'd gathered all the types of tea leaves that could be drunk and sorted them out very clearly. Black, green, white, and dark teas were the 4 main types of tea. Each type was further divided into different varieties based on where they'd come from. In total, there were over 50 jars of tea leaves. Different types of tea had differences in soil, water quality, climate, degree of roasting, preservation methods, and other conditions. The tea leaves all had different components and tasted completely different as well. Of course, only a very experienced tea fanatic could taste these differences. Han Yunxi loved tea too, but she wasn't a top-notch expert. Of course she couldn't taste them all. But she had the detox system. The detox system's pharmaceutical system could analyze the various components of Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine was known as herbal medicine in ancient times and consisted of plant medicines, animal medicines, and mineral medicines. Naturally, tea leaves counted as a type of plant medicine as well. Han Yunxi took a leaf from each of the 50 different types of tea leaves and steeped another 50 cups of tea. After putting them all into the detox system, she went to sleep. Sleeping was when one's consciousness was at its most relaxed and undisturbed. It was also when the detox system was at its most efficient. Perhaps it was too much work, but Han Yunxi didn't wake up until the morning of the next day. What were the results? Han Yunxi was very disappointed. She didn't think that whether it was the tea leaves or the tea water, the various components couldn't match the 10,000 snake poison. In other words, it was impossible to mix the 10,000 snake poison into the tea leaves or tea water. Once mixed in, either the toxicity would immediately appear and the tea would go bad, or the toxicity would be affected. After long-term consumption, it wouldn't be detected as 10,000 snake poison anymore. Han Yunxi sat among the pile of tea leaves in the study. Her beautiful brows were tightly knitted. Could it be that she was wrong again and the poison wasn't put in through the tea leaves? If it wasn't water or tea leaves, then what else could it be? She had asked Mu Qinggu before. Mu Qinggu usually didn't have any snacks other than the 3 normal meals. Clear water and tea were the only 2 kinds of drinks. Of course, when she went to the general's estate that day, the first thing she checked was Mu Qinggu's things. She had checked the tea leaves in both the estate and the military, but there wasn't anything out of the ordinary. After sleeping for a long time, her head was heavy. Looking at the messy pile of things on the desk, Han Yunxi couldn't help but feel vexed. In the end, where did she go wrong? Which detail did she miss? Including today, there were still 14 days until a month. In these few days, there was no news from Mu Qinggu's side. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi's brows furrowed even tighter. The corners of her eyes sank as she stared at the desk for a long time. Her entire person became very, very solemn. Her face was written that strangers should stay away. Yes, her mood was bad. After an unknown amount of time, she suddenly stood up and turned to leave. She decided to go out to get some fresh air and visit Han Yuni in the Han family. In the Han family's cloud water pavilion, little Chen Xiang and 7th concubine were doing handiwork in the courtyard. Regardless of whether Han Kongan was present or not, Su Ne was in charge of the household accounts. The monthly allowance given to each branch was limited. 7th concubine's side was even more docked. 7th concubine had no choice but to secretly do some handiwork to supplement her expenses. Although 7th concubine was favored by Han Kongan, she always swallowed her anger and gave in whenever she could. In fact, Han Kongan had always known that Su Ne was unfair. Helpless, he was afraid of Su Ne's maternal family's power and could only wrong 7th concubine. Perhaps it was because 7th concubine didn't fight that Han Kongan was willing to come to her place. 7th concubine, just you wait. When Her Highness Wang Fei makes our little young master the official wife, you'll be in charge of this family. Every dog has its day. I'll definitely help you think of a way to properly deal with Madame Su. Little Chen Xiang spoke very seriously, but 7th concubine's face was full of fear. Shoo! Chen Xiang, what are you saying? Lower your voice. Little Chen Xiang looked at the sky helplessly. She was on the verge of collapse. These days, she had persuaded 7th concubine many times and gave her plenty of confidence. But who knew that 7th concubine was still like this? She was so cautious that she was afraid of offending Su Ne and getting into trouble. Little Chen Xiang put down her handiwork and took a deep breath. She stood up and said seriously, 7th concubine, the storehouse key is in my master's hands. What are you afraid of? That day, you saw my master deal with eldest young master with your own eyes, didn't you? Chapter 91. Chen Xiang. 7th Madam panicked and pulled her to sit down. Chen Xiang, you don't understand. It's better to avoid trouble. Is still young. I don't want anything, I just want him to grow up safely. If it wasn't for my master stopping him that day, would the young master still have a way out? How many times could his little body take a beating? Chen Xiang was furious. At this time, little was lying on the windowsill, secretly watching his mother. His clothes were very old, washed white, and his trousers and sleeves were short. Although it wasn't as bright and well-fitting as other children's, it was especially clean and tidy, with an indescribable temperament. Hearing his mother's words, little Er's tender little face gradually revealed a disappointed expression. He gritted his teeth and wanted to speak several times, but unfortunately, every time the words reached his mouth, he swallowed them back down. His mother's forbearance made him able to endure. He was the most sensible child, but ever since he became sensible, he had always been sullen. The more little Chen Xiang spoke, the angrier she became. Seventh Madam could only keep persuading her, and finally changed the topic. Little Chen Xiang didn't notice, and continued to talk about other things. Little lowered his eyes in disappointment, pouted his little mouth, and slowly slid down from the windowsill. However, at this time, a familiar voice sounded. Little Chen Xiang, see what delicious food I brought for you. This voice, little Er's little head suddenly popped out from the windowsill, only to see that it was his big sister, Han Yunxi, who had saved him that day. She walked in with 2 big bags. It was her. Little would never forget that bright and beautiful face, that pair of resolute eyes, and even more so that voice that he had only heard once. That day, he was so cold that he almost lost consciousness. With his back to everyone, he didn't know what happened behind him. He only heard her lecturing Han Yuqi. It wasn't loud at all, but it was domineering and powerful. When he was about to faint, she said, don't be afraid. Big sister will definitely protect you. Even his father, whom he respected the most, and his mother, whom he loved the most, had never said such words to him. Sis, seeing Han Yunxi walk in, little called out in a low voice. He was a little timid and cautious. He had many older sisters, but this was the first time he had called out this word. Han Yunxi was in a bad mood, so shopping was her first priority. She brought in 2 big bags of things. One was warm snacks, and the other was medicinal herbs for 7th concubine and to nourish their bodies. Master, you've finally come. Little Chen Xiang was very excited and immediately rushed over. If her master did not come, she would think that she had been abandoned. 7th concubine hurriedly stood up and bowed. Greetings to esteemed Wang Fei, esteemed Wang Fei. Before he could finish his sentence, Han Yunxi waved her hand. Forget it, forget it. Where's Hurry up and call him out. I've brought you delicious food. Little was so excited when he heard this and was about to rush out, but he stopped before his mother said anything. Esteemed Wang Fei, you've taken such good care of and even let you spend money. 7th concubine felt very guilty. Han Yunxi was already in a bad mood and came out to get some fresh air. When she heard 7th concubine's polite words, she immediately became impatient. 7th concubine, if you're going to be so polite, you can wait outside. We'll eat with first. When she said this, 7th concubine was stunned. Little who was hiding at the side, couldn't help but burst into laughter. Who's laughing? Han Yunxi looked in the direction of the sound. Little immediately hid. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi's sharp eyes still saw his little head that he didn't remember to hide. This boy was so brave that day. Was he shy today? And he was even playing hide and seek with her. Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes and warned little Chen Xiang and 7th concubine not to make a sound. She quietly walked to the windowsill and stuck her head out to take a look. Unexpectedly, she didn't see anyone. Han Yunxi was delighted. She looked inside the room and saw little hiding behind the screen. He stuck his little head out to look at her from afar. His expression was adorably silly and timid, as if he wanted to come closer but didn't dare. Han Yunxi grinned and walked around the front door, pretending to run over. Little was shocked and turned to run to the back door. This time, Han Yunxi was overjoyed. Little fool. She laughed and ran to the back to block him. Who knew that little would be so fast? Just as Han Yunxi was about to reach the back door, he rushed out. Seventh concubine was about to call out to stop when little Qin Xiang immediately covered her mouth. It was rare for esteemed Wang Fei to be so playful, so how could she stop her? Han Yunxi grabbed nothing but air. She narrowed her eyes and laughed mischievously. Let's see who runs faster. Seeing her laugh, little pursed his lips. His eyes were adorable, and he ran further away, increasing the distance between them. Han Yunxi immediately chased after him. This time, she was even faster. Little was frightened and turned to rush out of the courtyard. Who knew that he would bump into Madame Su, who was just about to enter? Ah! Madame Su screamed and stumbled back 2 steps, almost falling. Fortunately, the maidservant beside her caught her in time. Little stopped abruptly. When he looked up and saw Madame Su's pale face, he immediately retreated. Before Madame Su could recover from her shock, the maidservant beside her started scolding. You little bastard, what did your mother teach you? Don't you have eyes? If you hurt Madame Su, can you afford to pay for it? Stop right there. There was a stone screen at the entrance of the courtyard, so Madame Su couldn't see the people inside. However, the people inside could clearly hear the maidservant scolding. Seventh concubine hurried out, but little Qin Xiang stopped her and whispered, Esteemed Wang Fei is here. What are you afraid of? Little Qin Xiang had been here for so long, waiting for Madame Su to come and settle the score. She didn't expect that Madame Su would choose to come when esteemed Wang Fei was here. At this moment, Han Yunxi was standing behind the screen, not far from little Little didn't refute. He glared angrily at the maidservant and retreated step by step. Madame Su composed herself. When she saw little angry eyes, she immediately became angry. Han Yuni, don't you understand that I told you to stop? What's with that look? Do you think you're in the right after bumping into me? Is this how your mother taught you to treat your elders? You uncultured thing. Madame Su had been with her son these days. Han Yuqi's butt was bleeding, so he could only lie down and not lie down. His temper was very irritable. Madame Su accompanied him for a long time before he was willing to apply medicine and his mood stabilized. Once she was free, the first thing Madame Su did was to visit seventh concubine. She knew that Han Yunxi had left her personal maidservant here, but so what if she was a personal maidservant? Not to mention a personal maidservant, even Han Yunxi couldn't meddle in the Han family's affairs. Last time, because of her son's rebuttal and offense, Han Yunxi had something on her, so Madame Su had no choice but to restrain her arrogance and give in. But now, Han Yunxi didn't have anything on them. She wanted to see what right Han Yunxi, a married daughter, had to meddle in her mother's affairs. Today, she specially came to find trouble with seventh concubine. She was worried that she wouldn't be able to find any flaws in the seventh branch, but Han Yuni came knocking on her door. As Madame Su spoke, she gave the maidservant a look, and the maidservant went forward to grab him. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Han Yunxi pulled Han Yuni aside and popped out from behind the screen. At this moment, it wasn't clear whether it was Han Yunxi who bumped into the maidservant or the maidservant who bumped into Han Yunxi. In any case, Han Yunxi retreated a few steps and accidentally lost her balance, falling down. "Aya!" she shouted, "which uncultured thing dares to bump into this princess consort?" Madame Su didn't expect Han Yunxi to be here as well. For a moment, she couldn't recover her senses and was dumbstruck. The maidservant's movements were still stiff. She also didn't know what had just happened. When she saw Han Yunxi sitting on the ground, her face turned pale and she was so frightened that she almost collapsed. This servant didn't do it on purpose. Whose maidservant is this? So rude and impetuous. I think you did it on purpose. Han Yunxi angrily rebuked and deliberately ignored Madame Su's existence. Hearing her shout, the maidservant's legs gave way and she fell to her knees. She was so frightened that she couldn't even speak clearly. This servant didn't, Madame Su watched from the side. Han Yunxi didn't look at her, but she didn't want to see Han Yunxi even more. What was this little slut doing here again? A married daughter only ran back to her maternal home after being divorced. She really was shameless. Of course, all of this anger was hidden in Madame Su's heart. After all, she was the daughter of a respectable family and had been in charge of the household for so many years. She still understood how things were done on the surface. It's a misunderstanding. I really didn't do it on purpose. Yunxi, when did you come? How come I didn't know? Madame Su said kindly as she hurried forward to help her up. But Han Yunxi suddenly stood up, her expression changing to a smile. Then I think he didn't bump into you on purpose, did he, second madam? Madame Su gave a start before realizing Han Yunxi's intentions. Hearing the word second madam made her eyes turn cold, her delicate features turning malevolent. That's right, how could it be on purpose? Servants don't know any better, so us masters naturally won't fuss over it, Madame Su forced a smile. It had to be said that Madame Su's words were quite formidable. If Han Yunxi continued to fuss over the matter, she'd become the servant she spoke of. Han Yunxi wasn't looking for trouble after eating her fill, but to save little E. Hearing Madame Su's words, she dropped the matter. She glanced at Han Yuni out of the corner of her eye and smiled. Second madam, you're here to find seventh madam, aren't you? I made a special trip to check on seventh young master's injuries. Seeing that he's alive and kicking, he should be fine, right? Then I don't have to worry, Madame Su said lazily, a trace of ridicule on her lips. Fortunately, he was treated in time. Otherwise, who knows how badly he'd be injured. He might be bedridden for 10 days to half a month. Han Yunxi wasn't polite at all. It was Han Yunxi who'd be bedridden for 10 days to half a month, all right? Madame Su suffered another setback. In a fit of anger, she couldn't help but remind her coldly, Yunxi, ever since I married into the Han family, even your father has called me madam. The Han family doesn't have a second madam, only Madame Su. Is that so? Why didn't I know about this? Esteemed Empress Dowager doesn't seem to know either. Before Han Yunxi could finish, Madame Su heard the threat in her words and immediately defended herself. Yunxi, I think you've misunderstood. I don't even have enough time to respect big sister, so why would I covet the position of official wife? What virtue or ability do I have? I don't dare compare myself to big sister. It's just a form of address. Your father doted on me back then, so he called me madam. This madam isn't the same madam. After all, it's your father's idea. It's not good for us to change it, is it? Han Yunxi smiled and thought to herself, Madame Su, Madame Su. So you still know how to be afraid. It's just a form of address. This Wang Fei's used to calling you second madam, it's very intimate. Yunxi, actually this. Before Madame Su could finish, Han Yunxi cut her off, imitating Madame Su's cold tone. Second madam, ever since I married into the Duke of Qin's estate, even my father calls me Qin Wang Fei. There's no Yunxi here, only esteemed Wang Fei. This. Chapter 92. Han Yunxi, that damned girl, actually used her own words to return the favor. Madame Su was so angry that her chest felt stifled. The taste of blood immediately rose to her throat. If she hadn't held it in, she probably would have spat out a mouthful of blood. But this shameless slut, did she really think she could use the Empress Dowager's name to strut around just because she saved the crown prince? She was too naive. Madame Su's hands clenched into fists within her sleeves. Her long eyebrows reached her temples, and her eyes were fierce and fierce. She'd originally planned to wait until her son's injuries were better before asking Han Yunxi for the storehouse key as the eldest son. But now she couldn't care less. There was no time like the present. She wanted the storehouse key now and kill Han Yunxi's arrogant limelight. Esteemed Wang Fei is right. This commoner was lacking in manners. Madame Su smiled insincerely and bowed slightly. It's fine. It'll be fine as long as you change. Han Yunxi was very confident and didn't feel guilty at all. If seventh young master doesn't have anything else, then I won't go in. Esteemed Wang Fei, you came just in time. I was just thinking of a day to pay you a visit. Why don't you come to this commoner's place for a cup of tea? Madame Su added. At these words, Han Yunxi knew what was going on. Madame Su wanted the storehouse key. Little Chen Xiang had been full of confidence in persuading 7th Madam these past few days. How would she know 7th Madam's worries? But Han Yunxi understood. She was a married daughter. Even if her status was noble, according to the customs of the world, she'd be gossiped about if she frequently returned to her maternal home, let alone meddling in her family's affairs. After all, Tianing country's customs could be considered civilized. In many places, once a daughter married out, she could only return to her maternal home after being divorced. Thus, if Madame Su allied with a few other concubines to ask for the storehouse key in her hands, she really would have to give it to them. However, since Han Yunxi dared to come, she must have a countermeasure. She wasn't afraid. Is there something you can't talk about here? Han Yunxi feigned ignorance as she asked curiously. This matter can be big or small. Now that I'm the one in charge of the Han family, it's more appropriate to talk about it in my room. As Madame Su spoke, she was about to leave when she turned around and glanced disdainfully at Han Yuni. She shouted towards the courtyard, 7th Madam, why don't you come along? 7th concubine's heart skipped a beat. She knew that something bad was about to happen, but she had no choice but to follow along. Before she left, she instructed you and Sister Chen Xiang stay in the courtyard. Don't run around, understand? Han Yuni nodded obediently as he stole glances at Han Yunxi's retreating form. His dark eyes were filled with reluctance as if he'd never see this big sister of his ever again. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi had only taken a few steps when she suddenly turned around and said, Little come here. Come with me. A child was a child. Han Yuni immediately broke into a grin, unable to hide his emotions. Just as he was about to run over, 7th concubine said, Esteemed Wang Fei, it's better for a child to, it's not a big deal, it's fine to let him come. I like him. Han Yunxi smiled and waved at A trace of worry flashed across 7th concubine's eyes. She wanted to say something but stopped. She originally wanted to wait for esteemed Wang Fei to come and talk to her about the storehouse key. Who knew that she would bump into Madame Sue the moment she arrived? Seeing that his mother didn't stop him, Eve was extremely excited and immediately ran over. However, this boy was still shy. He was clearly running towards Han Yunxi, but in the end, he grabbed his mother's hand. Han Yunxi was amused and picked up Eve. Why are you so afraid of me? I saved you, I won't eat you. E's little face reddened and he didn't speak. At the side, Madame Sue glanced at him and her lips curled into a mocking smile. No matter how much Han Yunxi dotes on this boy, he won't have a share of the storehouse key. Han Yunxi, just smile. I'm looking forward to your reaction later. Go, invite third concubine over as well. Tell her that there's something important and she'll definitely come. Madame Sue instructed in a low voice. On the way, Han Yunxi kept teasing Although was shy, he had a stubborn temper. No matter how Han Yunxi teased him, he didn't speak. Perhaps it was fate. Han Yunxi was exceptionally patient and didn't get angry. Hey, boy, do you know who I am? If you don't answer me, I'll punish you. Han Yunxi warned. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi just looked at her and blinked his big, adorable eyes without answering. Han Yunxi thought for a moment and asked, Boy, big sister plans to be your guardian and protect you. When you grow up, how do you plan to thank me? Unexpectedly, this time, actually pursed his lips and timidly said, When I grow up, I'll protect you. Han Yunxi didn't expect this and laughed happily. You finally opened your mouth. Okay, big sister will remember. Here, pinky swear. As she spoke, she stretched out her pinky. Blushed and smiled, stretching out his pinky as well. Holding Er's pinky, Han Yunxi's heart was actually a little heavy. Little you have to grow up smoothly. Other than Madame Tianxin's orchid residence, Madame Sue's fallen secluded residence was the largest and had the best location in the residence. Originally, this courtyard was worthy of its name, quiet and livable. Unfortunately, after eldest young master Han Yunxi's renovations, it completely lost its original elegance and became luxurious and high-profile. Those who didn't know would think that they came to the wrong place. Along the way, Madame Sue was looking forward to Han Yunxi's reaction when she asked for the storehouse key. She had thought of all sorts of reasons. This time, if Han Yunxi didn't hand over the storehouse key, it wouldn't be so easy for her to leave the Han residence. But who knew that when the group of people arrived at Fallen secluded residence, they saw second young Miss Han Ruoxue running out in a sorry state. No matter how they looked at it, it looked like she was running away. What was going on? Han Ruoxue turned around and saw Han Yunxi and the others. She was first stunned, then choked with sobs. Madame Sue, eldest young master, is too much of a bully. What happened? Madame Sue asked with a frown. Unexpectedly, before Han Ruoxue could complain, she heard a commotion from inside the door. Then, she saw a group of servants swarming out of the door like a swarm of bees. Many people were even pushed to the ground and rolled a few times. Madam, eldest young master is angry again. Not only did he chase everyone out, he also smashed a lot of things and almost hurt second young miss. Madam, eldest young master also smashed all of the medicine. Even the ointment you applied this morning was all gone. I couldn't persuade him no matter what. Hearing the servant's report, Madame Sue's face instantly darkened. Wasn't he fine when she left? How could this unfilial son change his face so quickly? Wasn't it shameful to make such a scene in front of Han Yunxi and 7th Madam? The servant still wanted to speak, but Madame Sue coldly cut him off. Enough, you useless things. None of you can serve a good person. No wonder eldest young master chased you out. Get the hell out of here. The servants and servants didn't dare to speak. They all admitted that they were unlucky and retreated. Madam Sue, you invited me and my mother here. What does eldest young master mean by this? Isn't he going too far? Han Ruoshue said angrily. Third, Madam Li's background wasn't as good as Madam Sue's, but she was still from a large family. Her maternal family in Tianshui City in the north of Tianning was considered a decent family. Although Madam Li was the daughter of a concubine, her dowry when she married into the family was not small. Moreover, she had always been generous and magnanimous, so she didn't have much direct conflict with Madam Sue. Madam Sue and Madam Li minded their own business and tolerated each other's children. Ruoshue, where's your mother? Is she still inside? Madam Sue pretended to be concerned. My mother told me to come over first. She'll be right behind me. Fortunately, she didn't come with me. Otherwise, I can guarantee that eldest young master would even dare to hurt my mother. Han Ruoshue usually disliked Han Yuqi the most, so she had to seize this chance to complain. It's his fault, his fault. Just take into account that his injuries are so serious and don't bicker with him, Madam Sue comforted. Madam Sue, don't worry. I'm not that petty, Han Ruoshue said. As Han Ruoshue spoke, she pretended to look up carelessly and saw Han Yunxi and the rest. Yunxi. Isn't this big sis Yunxi? Han Ruoshue cried out in pleasant surprise. She pretended to grumble as she glared at seventh madam and stomped her foot. Her acting was very real. Seventh madam, when did big sis Yunxi come? You didn't even tell me. Han Yunxi put on a false smile as she thought to herself, what a smooth and slick second young Mississippi. She's on good terms with all the other branches, so why didn't she get along with me back then? After being an older sister for so many years, this was the first time she'd heard her call her big sis Yunxi. When she, the eldest daughter of the first wife, lost power, Han Ruoshue, as the second young miss, was the boss of the sisters. She'd secretly instigated the other younger sisters to make things difficult for her. Don't think I don't know just because you're hiding behind the scenes. Han Ruoshue carefully examined Han Yunxi's face, excitement written all over her face. Big sis Yunxi, your face is really healed. It's so beautiful, so I. But before she could finish, Han Yunxi cut her off cold. Second young miss, this Wang Fei isn't familiar with you, is she? Han Ruoshue's expression immediately turned stiff, but she quickly recovered. Big sis Yunxi just loves to joke. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi wasn't planning to give her any face. Cold again, she said, this Wang Fei isn't joking. At these words, the atmosphere turned chilly. Han Ruoshue's eyes flashed with hatred as she thought to herself, Han Yunxi, this shameless thing. She caused father to go to prison, stole the storehouse key, and now she dares to come strutting around at the Han estate. Does she think no one knows about her scandalous deeds? She'd endure it. She'd wait and see how Lady Sue would take back the storehouse key and deal with her. Lady Sue must have called everyone here for the sake of the storehouse key. Thinking up to here, Han Ruoshue suppressed her anger and smiled faintly. She purposely gave Han Yunxi a grand bow. This commoner girl Han Ruoshue greets esteemed Wang Fei. Long live esteemed Wang Fei. Han Yunxi was too lazy to spare her a glance. Cold, she said, dispense with the formalities. At this moment, an angry roar came from the courtyard. Where's that shameless slut? Does she still dare to come? This young master sees her as a thief. She stole my family's things and still dares to come strutting around. This young master would like to see how long that slut can keep up her arrogance. If you know what's good for you, then hurry up and return the thing. Otherwise, this young master will definitely make her regret it. These curses didn't mention any names, but they all hinted at Han Yunxi. It was obvious that the young master inside knew Han Yunxi had come and was cursing Han Yunxi for taking the storehouse key. Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes. Of course she wouldn't be so stupid as to argue with Han Yunxi in such a provocation. She'd confess without being pressed and treat herself as a thief. If Han Yunxi wanted the storehouse key, he could forget about it in his next life. Chapter 93. Madame Su was originally embarrassed, but when she heard her son's words, she was overjoyed. Her son had finally improved. She looked at Han Yunxi with a cold smile, waiting for Han Yunxi to refute. Han Ruoxue was also caught off guard and gloated. Madame Su, who is young master scolding? What a terrible name. He's scolding the person who deserves to be scolded. Whoever is cheap or a thief, that's who. Madame Su chuckled, wishing for someone to chime in with her. Is that so? Thieves deserve to be scolded. They're worse than the rats in the sewers. Shameless. Han Ruoxue agreed. Exactly. Too bad there are a lot of people like that these days. Madame Su and Han Ruoxue took the opportunity to mock Han Yunxi. They thought that Han Yunxi would flip out, but she was unmoved. Seeing this, the two felt as if their fists had punched cotton. They couldn't muster up any strength and felt suffocated. Han Ruoxue was not satisfied and was about to speak when Han Yunxi said, "Second madam, did you invite everyone here to stand here and listen to young master scolding?" As she spoke, she put down and handed him to seventh madam. She continued, "How can the young master of the Han family be like this? What's the difference between him and a shrew?" Madame Su was about to answer when suddenly, a water bottle was thrown from inside. "Scram, bitch! All of you, scram!" Madame Su's smug expression changed abruptly. "What's wrong with you, Chi? Is there something wrong with his brain? Why is he scolding everyone?" Han Yunxi glanced at the broken pieces of the vase and smiled lightly. Her lips curled into a mocking smile, but she didn't say anything. However, that mocking smile was like a needle stabbing into Madame Su's heart. Madame Su felt embarrassed. She didn't know what her son would do to make everyone wait here. It was obviously inappropriate, and Han Yunxi wouldn't be happy either. Let everyone go in together. Heavens knew what kind of state Yu Chi, that brat, had turned the room upside down. When the time came, wouldn't Han Yunxi laugh at them? Madame Su pondered for a moment, wondering if she should go to the hall in the front yard. At this time, Han Ruoxue said, "Madame Su, why don't we not go in? Young master needs peace and quiet to recuperate. My mother hasn't come over yet. Why don't we go to my mother's courtyard? It's very close to here, just a few steps away." Han Ruoxue didn't want to miss such a great opportunity. She couldn't wait to see Madame Su make things difficult for Han Yunxi about the storeroom key. Madame Su was naturally happy that Han Ruoxue had given her a way out. She nodded repeatedly. That's good, that's good. Esteemed Princess Consort, please come with me. My mother has some good spring tea." Han Ruoxue was in a very good mood. Spring tea. Han Yunxi was bewildered. It was still winter in Tianing country right now. There was still a month until the New Year's festival, so where would the spring tea come from? Let's go. No matter how far it is to drink spring tea in the dead of winter, this Wang Fei still has to go, she said with a faint smile. Third madam might be a northerner, but she's an old tea addict. I think this spring tea must have been bought from the southern borders at a high price, right? Madame Su smiled as well. So they came from the southern borders. It should be spring there right now. Han Ruoxue never avoided talking about things that would give her face. Along the way, she showed off many things related to tea leaves. Han Yunxi listened in silence. In the past, she really didn't know that Third Madam and Han Ruoxue were so knowledgeable about tea. As expected, Third Madam's Sunset Court was very close to Madame Su's courtyard. They arrived after passing through a patch of grass. When Han Yunxi and the others arrived, Madame Li was just about to leave the house. As soon as she saw them, Madame Li hurried forward and curtsied to Han Yunxi. This commoner, Madame Li, greets esteemed Princess Consort. 10,000 blessings to esteemed Princess Consort. It had to be said that Madame Li gave Han Yunxi a better impression than 7th Madam. 7th Madam was too humble and timid, while Madame Li was neither servile nor overbearing. It made people feel very comfortable. Han Yunxi didn't have a deep impression of Madame Li. In her memory, this 3rd Madam had never had any conflicts with any branch. No one dared to provoke her, and she wouldn't take the initiative to provoke others. When she appeared in large events, she was always gracious and appropriate. She wouldn't be ignored or attract too much attention. Han Yunxi thought that if Han Ruoxue was a man, perhaps Han Kongan would consider giving the position of the head of the household to the 3rd branch. Although Han Ruoxue could take in a son-in-law, it wasn't something to be proud of. Moreover, it wasn't as if the Han family didn't have a male heir. You may rise. Han Yunxi waved her hand, indicating for 3rd Madam to rise. When 3rd Madam got up, she didn't forget to greet Madame Su and 7th Madam. Her attitude was polite and well-mannered. She even smiled at little Han Yunxi saw this but didn't say anything. Madame Su explained the purpose of her visit, and 3rd Madam invited everyone into the courtyard. As soon as they entered the courtyard, the fragrance of tea immediately assailed their nostrils. It was said that the tea in 3rd Madam's room never ran out. Everyone took a seat. 3rd Madam personally fetched a pot of spring tea and said with a smile, "I only received this tea a few days ago. I was just thinking of giving some to everyone to try. Coincidentally, everyone is here today. Madame Su, no matter what business you have, since you're here, let's try this tea first." Of course, Madame Su agreed. However, she was absent-minded and gulped down several cups of tea. 7th Madam didn't know much about tea and wasn't in the mood. Her worry was written all over her face. She wanted to remind Han Yunxi several times but didn't know how to. On the other hand, Han Yunxi wasn't in a hurry. She tasted it with relish. Needless to say, this spring tea was much more delicious than the tea she used for her experiments. The tea the servant gave her was autumn tea. Although it was well preserved, it had been a long time. The color and fragrance were much worse. As Han Yunxi drank, she pondered. Spring tea and autumn tea from the same tea tree tasted completely different. Presumably, the ingredients in the tea leaves were also much different. Should she use the spring tea to test it? She hesitated for a moment before asking, "3rd Madam, why is this spring tea more delicious than autumn tea?" 3rd Madam smiled and said, "The true meaning of spring tea isn't the tea leaves produced in the spring. It's the tea leaves picked from the first budding leaves of the tea tree after the winter. The flesh of spring tea leaves is thick and the tea leaves contain aromatic substances as well as various other substances. Therefore, compared to summer tea and autumn tea, the taste is more fresh and the fragrance is more pleasant." As soon as she said this, Han Yunxi became alert. Aromatic substances and other substances. What was 3rd Madam referring to? Could it be that she was referring to the various trace elements in the tea leaves? One had to know that these things were only studied so meticulously in the modern era. In ancient times, even traditional Chinese medicine was very rough on the ingredients of medicine. It was rare for a unit of measurement as small as money to appear on the medicine list. She didn't expect 3rd Madam to study it so meticulously. Was it the tea fanatics of this era who studied it so meticulously, or was third madam especially knowledgeable? Han Yunxi was shocked in her heart, but she didn't show it. She continued to ask, so, in terms of preservation, spring tea is also different from other teas? Third madam seemed to have sensed something. A trace of wariness flashed through her eyes as she smiled. True spring tea is rare. Most of it can be finished within a month, so it's not so particular about preservation. Han Yunxi asked a few more probing questions. Third madam's expression didn't change. She continued to smile and was very patient. However, the answers that came out were things that Han Yunxi already knew. There was nothing new. After a few cups of tea, Lady Su finally couldn't take it anymore. She gave third madam a look, telling her to stop talking. Third madam closed her mouth and changed the tea leaves to brew again. Lady Su was very satisfied. She put down the teacup and sighed with emotion. Esteemed Wang Fei, after master went to prison, many things happened in this family. A few of the concubines ran away with a lot of money. Now, only us three sisters are left. Sigh. As Lady Su spoke, she deliberately looked at Madame Li and then at seventh madam. She continued, Master was sentenced to life in prison. He doesn't even allow visitors. Now, the Han family is such a big family, but there's no one to call the shots. How many people in the family are jealous? Yesterday, third uncle even came to ask me. He said that if the young masters in the family can't get up, should quickly hand over the storehouse key to him. He said that the storehouse key and the Han family medical cannon belong to the Han family, not our family. Tell me, isn't that infuriating? As soon as she finished speaking, there was silence. Everyone knew that the storehouse key was in Han Yunxi's hands. Seventh madam lowered her head and didn't dare to make a sound. Third madam was busy brewing tea and didn't make a sound. Smart people could tell that Lady Su's words were beautiful. She didn't point the finger at Han Yunxi, but she was obviously insinuating that Han Yunxi was the least qualified to have the storehouse key. Han Yunxi didn't speak either. She hugged her with one hand and poured tea with the other. She was calm and composed. This spring tea was fresh but not greasy. It tasted so good that she was falling in love with it. Among those present, Er's expression was the most serious. His dark eyes were focused, as if he was trying hard to figure out the meaning behind Lady Su's words. Seeing that no one reacted, Madame Su didn't panic. She didn't expect seventh concubine and third concubine to speak up for her today. She only needed them to be present so that they wouldn't deny it if the storehouse key fell into her hands. Lady Su sighed softly and said, Yesterday, third uncle came. This morning, fourth uncle came as well. His intentions were similar to third uncle's. Don't you think they're bullying our Han family because we don't have enough people? Although no one answered, Lady Su continued, No matter what, our Yuqi is an adult. He's a dignified young master. How can they be like this? At this moment, Han Ruoxue, who had been sitting by third madam's side, couldn't help but ask, Lady Su, my father's been in prison for a while now. Why did they only come knocking now? At these words, third madam immediately stomped on Han Ruoxue's foot under the table. Han Ruoxue cried out in pain, but had no choice but to endure it. Lady Su rejoiced at the response and sighed. I don't know where they heard the news. They said the storehouse key is with esteemed Wang Fei because none of our young masters can support themselves. They had to rely on esteemed Wang Fei's power and influence to keep the key with her. At this, Lady Su finally met Han Yunxi's eyes. Esteemed Wang Fei, say, if news of this spreads, it doesn't matter if it loses the Han family's face, but it'll affect you negatively as well. If Grand Concubine finds out, she'll definitely be unhappy. If Grand Concubine Yi knew, of course she'd be unhappy. Although the Han family was large and prosperous, it wasn't even the tip of the iceberg compared to the Duke of Qin's estate. Why would Grand Concubine Yi care about the Han family's small assets? Once news of this spread, the fact that Qin Wangfei had returned to her maternal family to fight for the family assets was enough to put Han Yunxi on the capital's headlines again. In the end, she'd be shaming the Duke of Qin's estate. Chapter 94. Qin Wangfei's incomparably glorious title also brought Han Yunxi various restrictions. Han Yunxi understood this principle very early on. Although Madame Su's threat was very effective, it was a pity that it was no longer new to her. However, since Madame Su wanted to play, she didn't mind playing with her to the end. She smiled and said, "Second Madam, the Han family is in such a mess, but you still care about my imperial mother's feelings. This princess consort will definitely convey your concern to imperial mother." When these words came out, Madame Su couldn't remain calm. What did Han Yunxi mean? Could it be that she wasn't afraid? She even called her imperial mother so affectionately. Han Yunxi was calm and composed as she spoke again. "Since my uncles are so concerned about the storehouse key and the Han family successors, I'd like to ask Second Madam to tell them when they come back next time. Just say that my father's only been imprisoned, not dead. He knows the choice of the family head in his heart. There's no need for some people who have nothing better to do and have ulterior motives to worry about it." Madame Su's words were insinuating Han Yunxi, and now Han Yunxi was making oblique accusations. This time, how could Madame Su sit still? She didn't think that Han Yunxi would dare to mention Hong Kongan. She received news from the Ministry of Personnel that Han Yunxi saved the Crown Prince and denied Hong Kongan's diagnosis. This was the real reason why Hong Kongan was in prison. To put it bluntly, it was Han Yunxi who harmed Hong Kongan. Now she was restricting the Han family from visiting Hong Kongan. This was clearly because she stole the storehouse key and was afraid that the matter would be exposed. This shameless brat actually dared to talk about her father so confidently. Madame Su couldn't help but grit her teeth. Since this matter was brought up today, she wouldn't let it go so easily. Esteemed Princess Consort's words are reasonable. However, in this commoner's opinion, esteemed Princess Consort is a married woman after all. If the Han family's storehouse key is in your hands, it will inevitably cause gossip. Madame Su paused for a moment before continuing, "I'm sure old master entrusted the storehouse key to you in a moment of desperation and asked you to pass it to the Han family, right?" Han Yunxi didn't say anything. She raised her eyebrows and looked at Madame Su playfully. For a moment, the surroundings suddenly became quiet and the atmosphere became tense. Madame Su was obviously in the right, but for some reason, she felt guilty when Han Yunxi sized her up. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Madame Li, Madame Helian, you two should also say something. Right now, there are only us three sisters left in the estate. It's time for us to work together. The Han family cannot be defeated by our hands." Helian Shi didn't even dare to raise her head, let alone answer. Li Shi remained silent, as if this matter had nothing to do with her. She acted as the host and poured tea for everyone present. The scene fell into silence once again. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a rustling sound came from outside. "Are you guys discussing the storehouse key? This young master is the eldest son of the Han clan. Shouldn't you all respect this young master's opinion? Where's the key? Take it out now." She first heard the sound, then saw the person. The eldest young master was very agitated. He supported himself with a walking stick with one hand and covered his butt with the other. He limped over to stand at the door and looked at Han Yunxi coldly. He must have just found out that Madame Su wanted the storehouse key. Otherwise, he would have rushed out of Luoyu residence long ago. Previously, Han Yuqi had scolded her so harshly, but Han Yunqi had already let it go. She didn't expect that he would actually come here. Han Yunqi didn't have that much patience. Coldly, she said, "The storehouse key is in this princess's hands." "What are you muttering about?" When these words came out, Han Yuqi became even more agitated. He wanted to take a big step forward, but who knew that he would accidentally fall forward and fall flat on his face. Bang! It was especially heavy. Ouch! The eldest young master cried out in pain. He couldn't raise his head. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. Little was the first to laugh. Then, Han Yunqi laughed. "Ha, eldest young master, there's no poop on the floor. Why are you lying there?" "Son!" Madame Su shouted and rushed over. "Son, are you all right?" Madame Su struggled to support him. With great difficulty, she made Han Yuqi raise his head. She saw that his forehead, cheeks, and the tip of his nose were all bruised and red. It was as comical as it could be. Seeing this, the entire hall roared with laughter. Even the cautious seventh madam couldn't help but laugh. At this time, Madame Su was helping Han Yuqi turn over. Who knew that when he turned over, his butt hit the ground? Han Yuqi suddenly shouted, "It hurts, it hurts." As if he had been electrocuted, he suddenly lay on his side. His butt left the ground, and then he pushed Madame Su away. He was so fierce that it was terrifying. "Do you want to hurt me to death?" Madame Su saw that his face was twisted in pain. Her heart ached and she was very concerned. Mother didn't do it on purpose. "Are you all right? Does it still hurt? Let's go back. Mother will apply medicine for you." However, Han Yuqi turned his head and glared at the people around him. He said fiercely, "What are you laughing at? Is it very funny?" This time, other than Han Yunqi, everyone stopped laughing. Especially seventh madam. She immediately gave Little a look. Little could only purse his lips and bear it. "It's very funny. Ha ha ha, I laughed until my stomach hurts." "Eldest young master, why are you so weak? It's only been a few hits and you're injured so badly." Han Yunqi was amused. "You!" Han Yuqi was almost angered to death. He suddenly made a big move, but Madame Su hurriedly held him down. "Slow down. Slow down." With this reminder, Han Yuqi finally calmed down. With one hand covering his butt and the other holding Madame Su's hand, he carefully stood up. He was tall and strong, and with his fat body, his careful movements were especially comical. In short, Han Yunqi couldn't stop laughing until her stomach hurt. Little was by Han Yunqi's side. He had been holding back for a long time. Seeing Han Yunqi laughing like this, he finally couldn't hold it in and let out a pft. At this time, Han Yuqi, who had just steadied himself, immediately looked over coldly and angrily said, "Han Yuni, you dare to laugh at this young master." He couldn't do anything to Han Yunqi, but he could at least scold Han Yuni. "At such a young age, you dare to laugh at your elder brother. You uneducated thing." Little immediately quieted down. Seventh madam lowered her head and didn't dare to make a sound. Scolding a son for being uneducated in front of his mother was undoubtedly a kind of insult. A cold glint flashed through Han Yunqi's eyes. She hugged Little and sneered, "Laugh if you want to. He's already an adult, yet he dares to speak rudely in front of his elders. Is he worthy of being educated? Also, he can't even walk properly. From what I see, not only did his mother not teach him how to behave, she didn't even teach him how to walk. It's really too funny." If it were me, I would hide if I was afraid of being laughed at. What are you mumbling about? As Han Yunshi spoke, she deliberately laughed, ha ha ha, 3 times. She teased little Er's little face. Come, give sister a smile. With big sister's protection, little Er wasn't afraid of anything. He slowly cracked open his mouth and gave Han Yunshi an especially beautiful smile. That's right. Smile and you'll be in a good mood. Madame Su was so angry that her face turned purple. Han Yuchi was clumsy and couldn't refute her. His anger surged and he immediately shouted, Qin Wangfei, don't talk nonsense. Hand over the storehouse key now. That belongs to the Han family. Since you're already married, it has nothing to do with you. Hand it over immediately. In the end, they were all here for the storehouse key. Han Yunshi was calm and composed as she lifted her chin high. I didn't bring it. You. Han Yuchi clenched his fists and gritted his teeth as he said in a low voice, Slut, you're asking for a beating. Madame Su had long wanted to hit her, but after experiencing many storms, she was still calm. She pressed down on Han Yuchi's hand and said in a low voice, Didn't you suffer enough last time? Why are you so impulsive? See how I deal with her. Han Yuchi's heart still palpitated at the mention of the 50 paddles. He gritted his teeth and could only endure for now. Wang Fei, look at the situation now. Everyone is here today, so just say it. Han Yunshi sneered in her heart. She had originally planned to investigate the matter of the spy in the general's estate before dealing with the Han family's matter. Now, since Madame Su was so anxious and Madame Li could not hold back, there was no harm in saying it in advance. Chapter 95. Han Yunshi leisurely drank a cup of tea before opening her mouth. Father did tell me something. When she said this, even 7th Madam, who had her head lowered, looked up. Her brows were tightly knit, looking very worried. Madame Li was very calm, but Han Ruoxue and Madame Su were both very nervous. Of course, the most nervous person was Han Yuchi. He couldn't wait to blurt out, What is it? Something big. Han Yunshi's tone became heavy, which made Han Yuchi even more nervous. He forgot to investigate the truth and unconsciously leaned forward, anxiously asking, What big thing? Father said that the storehouse key will be temporarily given to me for safekeeping. When there's a suitable candidate for the head of the household, I'll hand over the key. During this time, he hopes that the young masters and misses of each branch will concentrate on studying medicine and won't have too many utilitarian thoughts. When she said this, Han Yuchi's eyes turned cold and he angrily said, Impossible. You're lying. He knew that Han Yunshi would definitely find an excuse like this. But if he wanted to fool everyone present, he was too naive. How could father do this? Not to mention that father went to prison because of her. Even before he went to prison, the person father disliked the most was this young miss. Even if father didn't have any intention of appointing another head of the household, he couldn't possibly entrust the storehouse key to Han Yunshi. Who did she think she was? Esteemed Wang Fei, it's not appropriate to say these words without evidence. Madame Su's voice also turned cold. On the side, Han Ruoxue also couldn't help it. Han Yunshi's words were simply a joke to her. Esteemed Wang Fei, this kind of joke isn't funny at all. How about you go to the Supreme Court and let everyone see father? Otherwise, even if we believe you, the people in the clan won't believe you. Han Ruoxue's words were very direct. This time, Madame Li didn't stop her. Han Yuchi quickly agreed, That's right. Qin Wangfei, if you have the ability, then go to the Supreme Court and make an exception and let us see father. Otherwise, we definitely won't believe you. That's right, Princess Consort. I've heard that life imprisonment isn't that strict. You're allowed to visit once or twice a year. I can't do that. Many people can't see Old Master. Maybe there's someone from above. If you can make an exception, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Madame Su couldn't wait to ask. Esteemed Wang Fei, of course we believe you. However, this is a big matter after all. You just said that Master is only in prison. He's still here. In my opinion, it's more appropriate to let the young masters and young misses meet with the old master. That way, you won't be the subject of gossip. Madame Li's words were always so beautiful. Han Yunxi nodded. Very good. The second branch and the third branch were finally on the same side. Everyone was waiting for Han Yunxi to speak. They thought that she would refuse due to her guilty conscience, but who would have thought that Han Yunxi would actually nod her head? All right, then this princess will immediately handle this matter when I return and arrange for my husband to meet with you as soon as possible. She said it so casually, as if she was saying that the weather was good. For a moment, everyone present was stunned and revealed an incredulous expression. Even the silent seventh madam was shocked. They didn't hear wrongly, right? Han Yunxi had forbidden them from visiting because she didn't understand the Han family situation or Han Yuni. She was afraid that if the Han family met with Han Kongin and talked too much, it'd affect how she supported the head of the Han family. Now, it was proven that she and Little E hit it off the best. She had long decided on a candidate. At this time, she wasn't afraid of the Han family meeting Han Kongin. She couldn't wait for them to meet him so that they wouldn't cause her trouble in the future. Today, she came to the Han family to see Little E and relax. She didn't expect Madame Su to be so impatient to ask her for the storeroom key. That's good too. I'll settle this matter as soon as possible and focus on the general's estate. Han Yunxi finished the tea in her cup, put down Little E and stood up lazily. Since the matter was settled, she should go back. Unexpectedly, just as she stood up, a northwest wind blew and the detoxification system suddenly issued an alarm. Beep, beep, beep. There's poison. The detoxification system's sudden warning surprised Han Yunxi and she froze. However, after a moment, the wind stopped and the detoxification system's alarm was immediately removed. Based on the frequency of the detoxification system's warning, the poison was very close to her. However, she had been sitting here for so long. Why did the detoxification system only warn her now? Why did the wind only warn her now? Without a doubt, the northwest wind had blown the poison over. The wind had a poisonous smell. Generally speaking, only extremely toxic poisons would be blown by the wind and their smell would remain in the wind. The smell would disappear very quickly in the wind. If it could be detected, it meant that the source of the poison wasn't far from her. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi abruptly turned to look at the northwest corner of the courtyard. There was a small wooden hut in the northwest corner of the courtyard. There were no windows and the door was locked from the outside. Could it be there? However, it wasn't too far away and didn't exceed the detection range of the detoxification system. Could it be that the amount of poison there was so little that the wind had to carry the smell of the poison over in order to detect it? Han Yunxi's curiosity was completely aroused. How could there be poison in Third Madam's courtyard? Since it was stored in the wooden hut, why was there so little poison? Han Ruoshua asked. This little hut was where her mother usually learned how to concoct medicine. It was really strange. Why was Han Yunxi suddenly interested in this hut? Han Yunxi finally turned her head and looked over. Her gaze inadvertently swept over third concubine, but it didn't linger. She smiled faintly and said, I see that this wooden hut is exquisitely built. I quite like it. When these words came out, third concubine's heart finally relaxed. She knew that she was overthinking things. Han Ruoxue was about to speak when third concubine beat her to it. Esteemed Wang Fei, this hut is my pharmacy. It was built a few years ago. So it was a pharmacy. The Han family was a medical family. Their children all had to learn medicine. The concubines who married into the Han family more or less also had to learn medicine. Most of them studied pharmacology, identifying medicine, and concocting medicine. As third concubine spoke, she walked over. Since esteemed Wang Fei likes it, why don't you go in and take a look? Master saw my hut before and also liked it very much. Han Yunxi was suspicious of third concubine. Who knew that third concubine would be so calm? It was really interesting. A complicated look flashed across her eyes. She smiled. Then let's go in and take a look. As soon as the small wooden hut opened, the smell of medicinal herbs rushed out. The space inside wasn't big. There were 2 rows of medicine cabinets on the left and right. In the middle was a long square table and a stove for boiling medicine. Everything was neatly arranged and very clean. Han Yunxi walked in and casually opened a few drawers. She found that there really were medicinal herbs inside. She walked slowly and quietly activated the detoxification system to slowly search for the specific location of the 3 snake poisons. The small wooden hut was too small. Everyone else was watching from the door. Only third concubine personally followed in. She walked behind Han Yunxi. Her steps were slow and composed. However, not long after, Han Yunxi stopped and gently pressed on a drawer in front of her. Seeing this, third concubine's heart suddenly jumped. She remembered very clearly that this drawer stored a type of snake poison. As Han Yunxi slowly pulled open the drawer, third concubine's heartbeat sped up again. Of course, there was no snake poison in the drawer. There were other medicinal herbs. However, she didn't know why, but she felt guilty for no reason. Medicinal herbs. Han Yunxi's heart jumped. She had clearly checked the snake poison. How could it be medicinal herbs? Without a doubt, the original snake poison here had been replaced. Moreover, it should have been done not long ago. That was why such a small amount of poison could still be detected. Han Yunxi originally wanted to ask, but after hesitating for a moment, she decided not to ask. She continued to walk forward and quickly locked onto another drawer. At this time, third concubine's heart jumped again. This drawer had also stored snake poison. Han Yunxi opened it and saw that it was still medicinal herbs. However, the detoxification system reminded her that there was a small amount of poison left. It was a highly toxic snake poison. Had it been replaced again? Such a coincidence? Han Yunxi was suspicious and inadvertently turned to look at third concubine. Third concubine didn't expect her to turn around. She was caught off guard and revealed a panicked expression. Wang Fei. Wang Fei, what's wrong? Chapter 96. Seeing Madame Li's flustered expression, Han Yunxi felt a bit suspicious. She didn't know if it was because she had turned around too quickly and scared Madame Li, or if Madame Li had a guilty conscience. It's fine. You have quite a lot of medicinal ingredients here. Han Yunxi smiled and continued walking forward. When Han Yunxi turned around, third Madame finally let out a sigh of relief. She didn't miss Han Yunxi opening the 2 snake poison drawers. She was clearly much slower than before. Someone who could cure the 10,000 snake poison must know the recipe for the 10,000 snake poison. Could it be that Han Yunxi suspected something? No. All of the poison had been cleaned out. Even if Han Yunxi opened all of the drawers here, she wouldn't find anything. Even if Han Yunxi really suspected her, she could only deny this suspicion in the end. Third Madam was third Madam in the end. She quickly calmed down and continued to follow Han Yunxi forward. This time, Han Yunxi didn't directly open the drawer with the snake poison smell. Instead, she casually opened a few normal drawers without poison before finally opening the one with the snake poison smell. In the end, she still didn't find any snake poison, only medicinal ingredients. "Third madam, the medicinal ingredients here aren't cheap." Han Yunxi joked with a smile. Esteemed Wang Fei must be joking. "I don't have many medicinal ingredients here, nor do I care about them. The Han family's pharmacy has a lot, and the ones in the storehouse are rare. If esteemed Wang Fei is interested, we can accompany you to the pharmacy to take a look." Third madam smiled and didn't notice anything strange. The Han family's pharmacy did have a lot of medicinal ingredients, even more than the storehouse. However, they were all common medicinal ingredients, so Han Yunxi wasn't interested. Even if 7 of the 10 snake poisons were found in the pharmacy, that would be normal. After all, those snake poisons could be used in medicine. However, Third Madam's place wasn't simple. It was possible that Third Concubine's 3 types of snake venom were also used to concoct medicine. However, Han Yunxi was still unwilling to believe that things could be so coincidental that the 3 snake venoms were all gone and replaced by other medicinal materials. Looking at Third Concubine's smiling expression, Han Yunxi wondered if asking Third Concubine at this time would inadvertently alert the enemy. After a moment of careful consideration, she decided not to say anything. "I won't go over. I'm tired today. It's time to go back." As she spoke, she stretched lazily and walked out of the wooden house. Outside, Madame Su, her son, and Han Ruoxue were all worried about the storeroom key. Seeing Han Yunxi's nonchalant attitude, they gnashed their teeth in anger, especially Han Yuqi. "Esteemed Wang Fei." He paused for a moment before continuing, "Are you really going to arrange for us to meet father? You're not lying, are you? What's wrong? Does eldest young master doubt this princess' words?" Han Yunxi coldly asked back. "I'm not doubting, I just don't know if I can believe you." Han Yuqi said a bunch of nonsense in a strange tone. Madame Su also opened her mouth with a smile. "Esteemed Wang Fei, how about this? You set a time so that we can all prepare." "That's right. Set a time so that we can prepare." The impatient Han Ruoxue also quickly agreed. Of course they had to set a time. Otherwise, who knew when Han Yunxi would do it? In the end, they might just drag it out and leave it unsettled. Han Yunxi looked at everyone one by one and pretended to ponder, looking troubled. Seeing this, Han Yuqi sneered, "Esteemed Wang Fei, you can't be thinking of saying that you can't make an exception for the Supreme Court, right? This matter is really difficult to handle." Han Yunxi sighed. Seeing Han Yunxi in such a difficult situation, everyone was secretly delighted. They all thought that they had forced her into a corner and that she had nothing to say. But who knew that Han Yunxi would only sigh and say, 10 days. 10 days later, I'll arrange for all of you to see father." Actually, as long as she said the word, the Han family would immediately see Han Kongan. But this group of people was in such a hurry, so of course she had to make them wait like a year. They were waiting to see her make a fool of herself, waiting to see her trick exposed. And she was waiting to see their reactions after seeing Han Kongan. Presumably, Madame Su and eldest young master's reactions would be the most spectacular. They didn't think that Han Yunxi would give a time so quickly. Madame Su and Han Ruoxue were very surprised. Han Yuqi still didn't dare believe it and asked again, "Esteemed Wang Fei, are you sure? Don't go back on your word and play with us." This time, Han Yunxi was angry and coldly said, "What, does eldest young master want this Wang Fei to write a contract? Can the imperial family's people not keep their word?" The words, "imperial family's people," reminded Han Yuqi to have a sense of propriety. If he didn't want his butt to be hit again, he'd better restrain himself. Angrily glancing at Han Yunqi, Han Yuqi unwillingly said, "I'll believe you this time." Seventh Madam was the most taciturn of them all. She looked at Han Yunqi with surprise and worry. She also didn't believe that her husband would entrust such a big matter to esteemed Wang Fei. She was really afraid that esteemed Wang Fei would cause trouble and harm her. Esteemed Wang Fei had saved the young general and the crown prince with great difficulty and had some status in the imperial family. What if something shameful happened? What would she do? Moreover, once esteemed Wang Fei lost her power and offended Madame Su, her and little Er's future days would be even more difficult. Seventh Madam could only hope to see her husband in 10 days so that he could make arrangements for them. After blocking Han Yuqi's mouth, Han Yunqi rubbed little Er's head and said, "Study your medical books well. Don't be like some ignorant and incompetent people who only know how to fight for power all day. We'll be doctors in the future. To be a doctor, you must first have moral character, then medical character. Do you understand?" This time, little didn't look at his mother. Instead, he directly nodded and answered very seriously, "Understood." Han Yunqi was overjoyed and instructed Seventh Madam, "Seventh Madam, don't keep anything to yourself. Feel free to talk to little Xiang. Seeing her is like seeing me." These words were not so much for Seventh Madam to hear, but for Madame Su to hear. She still wanted to keep little Xiang in the Han family. After finishing her instructions, Han Yunqi was in a particularly good mood. She turned back to look at the small wooden house one more time before turning to leave. She thought that she had to get a batch of spring tea to test and think of a way to personally inspect Third Madam's courtyard. Who knows, she might make some other unexpected discoveries. Of course, the faster she did this, the better. Otherwise, Third Madam would be on guard and she wouldn't be able to find anything. In the dead of winter, spring tea was a rare thing. But no matter how rare it was, if Third Madam could get her hands on it, Han Yunqi would be able to as well. The first thing Han Yunqi did when she returned to the Duke of Qin's estate was to give Steward Xia a large sum of silver and tell him to get a large batch of spring tea and well-preserved summer tea as quickly as possible. In the past, she'd only used autumn tea for her experiments. She'd left out the spring and summer teas. Now that she'd been inspired by Third Madam, she looked forward to discovering something. After seeing Han Yunqi leave, Murong Wanru emerged from her hiding spot, calm and composed as she gave Steward Xia a cold look. Ever since Han Yunqi saved the crown prince and attended the Empress Dowager's banquet, Grand Concubine had been restless. She hadn't bothered Han Yunqi in the past few days, but she'd warned Murong Wanru repeatedly to keep a close eye on Han Yunqi and report back as soon as there were any clues. Naturally, Murong Wanru kept a close eye on her. But to her surprise, Han Yunqi didn't have any connections with the palace at all. Instead, she'd stirred up quite a bit of trouble at the Han estate. According to reliable information from spies, Han Yunqi had grasped the storehouse key that symbolized the head of the Han family. Moreover, she'd hit the eldest young master. A married-off daughter was actually meddling in her maternal family's affairs and controlling the house key. If news of this got out, Han Yunqi would become the talk of the streets and alleys as everyone pointed fingers at her. Murong Wanru didn't report the news to Grand Concubine immediately. She was waiting for the Han family to make a bigger fuss. From what she understood, Lady Su of the Han family wasn't easy to provoke. Of course, if Lady Su couldn't make a fuss, she didn't mind helping her on the sly. "Steward Xia, what did my sister-in-law tell you to do? It seems urgent." Murong Wanru asked with a smile. Esteemed Wang Fei told this one to buy some tea. "Maybe the kitchens didn't send enough," Steward Xia said as he quickly took out the silver that Han Yunqi had given him. She knows how to drink tea too. Murong Wanru laughed disdainfully. She caught sight of the wads of silver in Steward Xia's hands. The sight of it made her eyes turn red. She'd counted all the gold, silver, and ingots bestowed by the emperor last time. It was enough to feed Han Yunxi for the rest of her life. As for her, she relied on the money from the accounts to live each month. Although it wasn't a small amount, it wasn't enough for her to squander. Every month, she'd be hard-pressed for a few days. Comparing the two made her feel stifled. Thinking up to here, Murong Wanru didn't hesitate to take half of the silver from Steward Xia's hands. Without a word, she gave a cold snort and left. Of course, Steward Xia didn't dare to make a sound, but his heart was filled with resentment. In the past, Miss Murong had intercepted plenty of Grand Concubine Yi's rewards for her servants. Who in the estate didn't know that this foster daughter had admired the Duke of Qin for a long time? Compared to Grand Concubine Yi, this foster daughter probably hated esteemed Wang Fei even more. However, putting aside the generous rewards, many of the servants were still on the side of the princess consort after interacting with her for a period of time. Esteemed Wang Fei was a good-natured person who never made things difficult for the servants. Just this point alone was enough to throw Murong Wanru off. If it wasn't for the fact that Grand Concubine Yi doted on Murong Wanru, no one would be afraid of this foster daughter. Steward Xia had spoken up for esteemed Wang Fei just then. He only said he wanted to buy tea leaves, but didn't say how much less spring tea. Although he didn't know why esteemed Wang Fei wanted so much tea leaves, it was better if Miss Murong didn't know. Fortunately, esteemed Wang Fei had given him enough silver. Even if half of it was taken away, Steward Xia still had enough to use. Han Yunxi's mood recovered. She returned to leisurely Cloud Pavilion and planned to do a thorough cleaning of the study. But as soon as she reached the courtyard gates, she saw a kind-looking old mama in her 40s. She was dressed simply, but her hands and feet were nimble as she carried out a large pile of trash. Han Yunxi gave a start. Who was this? This old servant, Zhao Mama, pays respects to esteemed Wang Fei. This old servant was sent here by His Highness Duke of Qin. Chapter 97. Han Yunxi's gaze inadvertently fell on the trash next to Qin Mama's hand. Her heart was filled with suspicion. Did Long Fei Yi ask her to come? Why did that guy suddenly send someone to order her around again? Could it be that he knew that little Chen Xiang had gone to the Han family, so he was afraid that she wouldn't have any servants to use, so he gave her a new one? When did such a cold ice cube become so meddlesome? Seeing Han Yunxi's gaze, Zhao Mama felt uneasy and hurriedly explained, Esteemed Wang Fei, this old servant didn't throw anything away. These things were all ordered by His Highness Duke of Qin to throw away. At this time, Han Yunxi finally recovered her senses. She didn't pay attention to Zhao Mama's words and only made an "oh" sound before asking, Zhao Mama, right? Yes, yes. Zhao Mama hurriedly replied. It's fine. You can go. Be careful. Han Yunxi indifferently said and continued to walk into the courtyard. Wang Fei. Zhao Mama seemed to want to say something, but seeing that esteemed Wang Fei had already entered the courtyard, she could only drop the matter. She thought that esteemed Wang Fei really wasn't ugly. She was much prettier than she had imagined. She even told her to be careful. It seemed that her heart wasn't bad. Han Yunxi pouted as she walked. How did that ice cube know that little Chen Xiang wasn't here? Why did he suddenly become so kind and add another servant to her? Alright, no matter what, even if he was kind, shouldn't she go over and thank him for his kindness? Han Yunxi's footsteps unconsciously became lighter. Just as she was about to turn around and make a trip to Long Fei Ye's sleeping quarters, who knew that at this time, a familiar voice would suddenly sound out from Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. You just came back. Where are you going? The deep voice carried a unique coldness that made Han Yunxi unconsciously shiver. Entering the room, she saw Long Fei sitting on the main seat. Usually, he was dressed in black. Today, he was dressed in white with wide sleeves and a V-shaped collar decorated with golden embroidery. Apart from being simple, it made him look handsome and refined. There was an indescribable sense of nobility that made people not dare to offend him. Han Yunxi didn't know if it was because she hadn't seen enough or because she wasn't immune to the white-clothed Long Fei, but she was always easily entranced and confused. However, Long Fei hated this kind of love-struck look the most. His eyes, which were as deep as the sea, darkened as he asked coldly, "Where do you plan to go?" He had been waiting for her here for more than 2 hours. Chen Xiang was not here. Once this woman went out, no one would know where she went. If something happened outside, no one would know. Han Yunxi immediately came back to her senses. She secretly scolded herself for being muddle-headed again. This kind of man was not someone she could casually admire. "I didn't know your highness was here. Please excuse my lack of manners." Han Yunxi politely bowed before replying, "I just met Xiao Mama at the door. Knowing that your highness had rewarded a servant, I was just about to go over and thank your highness." "Your highness is considerate." Unexpectedly, Long Fei said, "This prince cannot tolerate dirty places in Hibiscus Courtyard. In the future, Xiao Mama will only be responsible for the cleaning of Leisurely Cloud Pavilion." "What? Does your highness think I'm dirty?" Han Yunxi blurted out. Long Fei's mouth twitched. He paused for a moment but still replied, "Yes." Han Yunxi immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. So this guy sent Xiao Mama here specifically to clean. To put it bluntly, this guy thought she was dirty and was afraid that her Leisurely Cloud Pavilion would pollute Hibiscus Courtyard. She thought that he knew that Chen Xiang was not here and was considerate of her lack of subordinates. He was afraid that she would suffer. Sure enough, it was her own wishful thinking. This hateful guy. She should have known that he didn't have any good intentions when he meddled in other people's business. "Many thanks for your highness's care, concern. Qinxia will remember it." Han Yunxi's tone immediately turned cold. The word concern was especially meaningful. She thought that this guy had nothing better to do and would leave after specially coming to remind her of this matter. However, Long Fei still sat in the main seat without moving. Han Yunxi raised her head and met his cold eyes. She expressionlessly asked him to leave. "If your highness doesn't have any other matters, Qinxia will be resting." Every time she saw this guy, it was a kind of enjoyment when he didn't speak. However, once he opened his mouth, she basically didn't want to see him anymore. If Long Fei remembered correctly, this wasn't the first time Han Yunxi had asked him to leave. There were so many places in the world waiting for him to grace them with his presence, but this woman didn't know what was good for her. "Must there be a reason why this prince is looking for you?" Besides being cold, Long Fei's voice also contained a trace of toughness. "Was this guy here to pick a fight? Then what did your highness come here for?" Han Yunxi asked back. Actually, she wanted to ask, "Did you come here to pick a fight?" In her impression, this guy didn't seem to have any problems the last time he came here. Long Fei suddenly didn't know how to answer Han Yunxi's question. His cold eyes flashed with displeasure before he stood up and ordered, "I'm looking for you to treat the poison. We'll leave right now." No matter what he did, none of the northerly spies he'd caught before had confessed. They didn't even eat or drink. One by one, a few of them had starved to death, while the remaining 4 had all been poisoned. His protective measures had been very good, leaving no room for them to commit suicide. Moreover, they'd been caught a month ago, so how could they be poisoned for no reason? Chu Shifeng had found a few poison doctors to examine them for 2 days, but they couldn't even tell what kind of poison they'd been poisoned with. Another one had died this morning, leaving only 3 spies left. They must have taken poison, which meant they couldn't take the interrogation any longer. If they succeeded in killing themselves at this critical juncture, then all of his previous efforts would have been for naught. Since the 2 poison doctors were at a loss, he immediately thought of Han Yunxi. Long Fei Ye's commanding tone made Han Yunxi very unhappy. When she recalled how he disliked her for being dirty, she lazily replied, "Your Highness, Qinxie is tired. You should find someone better qualified." Long Fei Ye wasn't surprised by Han Yunxi's refusal. He stopped in his tracks, but didn't turn back with a disdainful smile. He casually tossed a bag of silver behind him, which landed accurately on the tea table by Han Yunxi's side. There was a thud, but it was obvious that there was quite a bit of silver inside. Perhaps in the past, Han Yunxi would have cherished this silver. After all, she needed it to live and buy medicinal ingredients. But with Emperor Tianhui's rewards, as long as she didn't squander it extravagantly and built a house or estate, she had enough silver to last her a lifetime. Now she could willfully say that money wasn't a problem for this Wang Fei. Of course, she didn't have such confidence in front of the moneybags Long Fei Yi. She didn't move, but said mildly, "Your Highness, Qinxie has been very tired these past few days. This will affect the accuracy of my diagnosis. I ask that Your Highness find someone better qualified to avoid delaying matters." At these words, Long Fei Ye's proud body stiffened. It was obvious that he hadn't expected Han Yunxi to refuse again. He slowly furrowed his brows and turned to look at her. Han Yunxi immediately felt a dark, cold gaze shoot towards her. It was impossible to say that she didn't feel guilty, but she was going to go against this guy today. If she wasn't going, then she wasn't going. She'd like to see what this guy could do to her. Han Yunxi lowered her head and restrained her gaze in silence. Long Fei Yi stared at her in silence as well. Silence filled the room as tension filled the air. Time seemed to freeze, as if this deathly stillness would never be broken. In this deadlock, who would be the first to speak? After a long time, Han Yunxi unconsciously pursed her lips. She wasn't sure if it was because her nerves had been stretched too taut, but she suddenly relaxed. For some inexplicable reason, she lifted her head to look at Long Fei's expression. Would it be scary? It was rare for this fellow to have something he couldn't do, to have a time when he was defeated. Only, when she was about to carefully raise her head, Long Fei Yi suddenly turned his head. His cold eyes narrowed as he walked away without saying a word. Han Yunxi didn't expect this. She quickly raised her head to look, but she didn't see his cold and handsome face. She only saw his cold back. In the end, no one broke the silence. But the silence was no longer there. Because he had left. Inexplicably, a sense of loss filled her heart. Han Yunxi really couldn't calm down. Things shouldn't be like this. It seemed like a lot more was going to happen. Only, Han Yunxi didn't know how things were going to turn out. She clearly didn't want to go, and now she didn't need to go. Why didn't she feel any sense of relief? She clearly wanted to see him suffer a setback. Now that she had angered him to leave, why didn't she feel any satisfaction from her revenge? Based on that fellow's character, after being rejected once, he probably wouldn't come looking for her to cure his poison again, right? She should be happy. Han Yunxi sighed and shrugged her shoulders. The less she meddled in that fellow's matters, the less trouble she would have, which was pretty good. After thinking it through, Han Yunxi stretched her body and sat down to pour herself some water. It was also at this time that she noticed the changes in the room. Actually, it couldn't be said to have changed. It was just a lot cleaner. The floor, tables, and chairs were all polished until they shone brightly. The stench that originally came from the study room had long disappeared. The air was still filled with the faint fragrance of herbs, as if even the air had been purified. So clean. Zhao Mama can't have serious mysophobia, right? Han Yunxi exclaimed in surprise. She muttered to herself as she walked towards the study room. She saw that the study room was also tidied up. The poison tea on the table was all gone. The things she had placed on the table were all unimportant, so she wasn't afraid of losing them. However, it had to be said that Han Yunxi didn't like other people messing around with the things in her study room. A trace of displeasure flashed across her eyes. She walked closer and inspected them one by one. She found that the things that should have been thrown away were all left behind. The things that were still useful were all cleaned and placed neatly together. Moreover, in the middle of the table, there was a basin of water nurturing coppermint. The lush green plants grew very densely, adding a touch of vitality to the gray study room. It was especially pleasing to the eye. All right, Han Yunxi admitted that she was quite satisfied. Based on this degree of cleanliness, she could overlook Zhao Mama messing around with her things. At this time, Zhao Mama came back from outside. Seeing Han Yunxi in the study, she hurried over. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness Duke of Qin has left. Han Yunxi nodded, then added, in the future, if he's here, you have to let me know. Also, in the future, don't touch the things in my study room. I'll tidy it up myself. Zhao Mama didn't explain that she had wanted to ask His Highness Duke of Qin to stay for dinner, but this mistress had left too quickly. She could only respectfully reply, yes. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, she originally thought that His Highness Duke of Qin would stay for dinner. Who knew that he would leave? Esteemed Wang Fei, what do you like to eat for dinner? This old servant will instruct the kitchens to prepare it. Zhao Mama asked. Han Yunxi was about to answer when she suddenly remembered Long Fei Ye's words. Thus, she raised her brows and looked at Zhao Mama. She smiled playfully and said, Zhao Mama, aren't you only in charge of cleaning the leisurely cloud pavilion? Chapter 98. His Highness Duke of Qin never said she was only in charge of cleaning. Zhao Mama gave a start before she said seriously, Esteemed Wang Fei, this old servant doesn't understand what you mean. Now Han Yunxi was doubtful as well. What did His Highness Duke of Qin have you here for? Zhao Mama didn't know why esteemed Wang Fei would suddenly ask such a question. She repeated her introduction from before. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness Duke of Qin had this old servant come to serve you. If there's anything you need in the future, feel free to order this old servant. Hearing this, Han Yunxi gave a start as well. Long Fei Yi, that guy, was lying to her. No, that's not right. That guy was just seizing the chance to say he didn't like how dirty her place was. Her place being dirty had nothing to do with him, so did he have to say such poisonous things about her? How boring. Han Yunxi pursed her lips and was about to speak when Zhao Mama spoke up again. Esteemed Wang Fei, don't worry. This old servant might be old, but I'm much easier to order around than those young servant girls. Ever since the Duke of Qin's estate was built, this old servant has been serving here. So early. Then you count as a senior official, right? Han Yunxi was surprised. Little Chen Xiang was new here and had no background at all, so she could use her without worries. Zhao Mama had so much experience, so her experiences must be complicated. She couldn't be related to Grand Concubine Yi, right? This old servant really is a senior official, Zhao Mama said proudly. Esteemed Wang Fei, this old servant used to be from the palace and watched His Highness grow up. His Highness trusts this old servant, so after he was named Duke of Qin, he brought this old servant out of the palace. Everything big and small in the hibiscus courtyard is taken care of by this old servant. Hearing this, Han Yunxi was even more surprised. So there were servants in the hibiscus courtyard. She just felt that if such a large courtyard didn't have any servants to take care of, how could the guards do a good job of cleaning and tidying? Why haven't I seen you before? Of course, this was the question she was most concerned about. A few months ago, I went back to my hometown in the south. I just came back today, and your highness called this old servant over. Xiao Mama said. She was afraid that Han Yunxi would not believe her, so she quickly added, Princess Consort, this old servant knows all the guards in this yard. If you don't believe me, you can ask them. Granny Zhao had just arrived, and before she could even pack her luggage, she was called over by His Highness to tidy up the rooms in Idle Cloud Pavilion, especially that study. When Zhao Mama arrived and found out that the new Qin Wangfei was staying, she was surprised. She never thought that His Highness would allow this woman to stay in Furong Garden. Wasn't he very against this marriage before? When she saw the smelly and messy desk in the study, she was shocked. It had to be known that His Highness was obsessed with cleanliness and hated messy things the most, but he actually allowed the Princess Consort to make this kind of mess. After Granny Zhao cleaned everything up, His Highness entered the room and sat on the main seat for a moment. The first thing he said was, Granny Zhao, you will stay here and serve from now on. Naturally, Zhao Mama was curious and probed. I heard that Qin Wangfei is very beautiful. But His Highness didn't say a word. He didn't even spare her a glance, so Zhao Mama didn't dare to ask. In her heart, she wondered if this Qin Wangfei had gained favor. While she was cleaning the courtyard, she found a guard to ask, but he didn't know a thing either. Although Granny Zhao couldn't understand it no matter how much she thought about it and found it unbelievable, there was one thing she was certain of. Since His Highness allowed Qin Wangfei to stay in the hibiscus garden and even let her serve her, no matter what, His Highness had acknowledged this Wangfei in his heart. Since she was a woman recognized by His Highness, of course she had to serve her wholeheartedly. Hearing Zhao Mama's words, Han Yunxi asked mildly, Zhao Mama, in other words, you've served His Highness since he was young, right? Zhao Mama smiled and nodded, looking especially benevolent. After all these years, His Highness is only used to this old servant serving him. This old servant knows his temper better than Grand Concubine Yi. Since you're here, then His Highness's side. Han Yunxi probed. Esteemed Wangfei, don't we all live in the same courtyard? Don't worry, this old servant won't be lazy, Zhao Mama smiled. Han Yunxi gave a start before she gave an "oh" and waved her hand. I understand. If there's nothing else, you can go about your business. Esteemed Wangfei, what do you want to eat tonight? This old servant will tell the kitchens right now. Zhao Mama was very dutiful. You decide, Han Yunxi said mildly. Her mind was a mess, so how could she care about what she wanted to eat? After Zhao Mama left, she sat there unmoving. Long Fei Yi had actually given such an important servant to her. Was there some kind of conspiracy? Was she here to keep an eye on her? Very soon, Han Yunxi rejected the idea. She lived in the Furong Garden, which was within Long Fei Yi's sphere of influence. Wouldn't it be easy to keep an eye on her? How strange. Just what did that fellow mean? That night, Zhao Mama ordered the kitchens to make plenty of dishes. She even made ginseng soup for Han Yunxi to nourish her body. It had to be said that compared to little Chen Xiang, Zhao Mama was a very competent servant. She didn't talk much, but left to wait after finishing her work. She wouldn't disturb her for no reason. Han Yunxi had no idea that Zhao Mama was secretly observing her from the shadows. Although she had a good impression of this esteemed Wangfei, Zhao Mama still couldn't figure out why His Highness Duke of Qin had taken a fancy to this woman. She had once made a bet with Chu Shifeng, who bet that His Highness wouldn't be interested in women before the age of 30. She, on the other hand, bet that His Highness wouldn't approach women for the rest of his life. Still, Zhao Mama was very happy that a mistress had come to the Furong Garden. At least His Highness Duke of Qin wouldn't be alone for the rest of his life. Zhao Mama decided that she should get closer to this mistress and teach her how to take care of His Highness after they were familiar with each other. Han Yunxi finished her work in the study and sat in the courtyard to drink tea. She waved at Zhao Mama, indicating for her to come over. What instructions does esteemed Wang Fei have? Zhao Mama was very respectful. Zhao Mama, I don't have so many formalities here. Don't make it so complicated. Sit, Han Yunxi said as she patted the seat next to her. Esteemed Wang Fei, there are differences in status. This servant cannot sit, Zhao Mama was very serious. Han Yunxi sighed to herself. As expected of someone from the palace. She's different from little Chen Xiang. Then you can sit on the stool, Han Yunxi said. Many thanks to esteemed Wang Fei, Zhao Mama finally sat down, lowering her head to Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi hesitated before asking in a low voice, do you know that His Highness has a junior sister? Zhao Mama's eyes flashed with amusement at these words. I know. It's Western Zhou's Princess Changle, Duan Miao. Han Yunxi had only been probing. She did not expect that Zhao Mama would actually know and answer her. Then which sect do they belong to? Han Yunxi asked again. Tianshan Kenzo. Zhao Mama replied without thinking. Han Yunxi was shocked. Zhao Mama had actually told her just like that. Tianshan Kenzo was one of the three great powers of the martial arts world. It was the home of the world's swordsmanship. It was said that the examinations there were very strict, and only one disciple was accepted every year. It wasn't strange that Long Fei could get in. That fellow was inhumanly strong to begin with, but Han Yunxi didn't expect Duan Muyao to get in as well. In other words, her martial arts skills weren't low. Of course, she had no time to consider this question. She was curious as to whether Zhao Mama would answer her every question. A trace of craftiness flashed through her eyes. Han Yunxi continued, Zhao Mama, His Imperial Highness often does not return home at night. He should have a place to stay outside, right? However, this time, Zhao Mama hesitated. Seeing this, Han Yunxi's lips curled into a smile. It seemed that her probing had been correct. However, Zhao Mama's reaction was beyond her expectations. Zhao Mama looked around and lowered her voice to a whisper. Esteemed Wang Fei, this is His Imperial Highness's private matter. This old servant will tell you. Don't say that this old servant told you, and don't tell anyone else. Han Yunxi did not expect this, and her eyes widened. Zhao Mama was about to speak when Han Yunxi stopped her. Wait. Why are you telling me this? Zhao Mama stared blankly and innocently replied, Esteemed Wang Fei, you were the one who asked first. Why would you tell me if I asked? Han Yunxi retorted. Granny Zhao looked at her and suddenly smiled like an old urchin. So, esteemed Wang Fei is testing this servant. Han Yunxi felt a little awkward at being exposed. She pursed her lips and said, Zhao Mama, you're thinking too much. It's fine now, you can withdraw. But Zhao Mama didn't leave, but smiled. Esteemed Wang Fei's suspicions are understandable. After all, this is the Duke of Qin's estate. Esteemed Wang Fei is not welcome here. Han Yunxi's eyes turned cold at these words. This old mama really wasn't simple. Was she planning to lay all her cards on the table? What else do you want to say? She asked icily. However, Granny Zhao surprised her once again. Esteemed Wang Fei, you can set your heart at ease. This old servant is definitely His Imperial Highness's person. This old servant was bestowed to His Imperial Highness by the late Emperor and has nothing to do with Grand Concubine Yi. This old servant is loyal and devoted to His Imperial Highness. Zhao Mama's wrinkles grew taut because of her seriousness. Han Yunxi never thought she'd say such words. So it had nothing to do with Grand Concubine Yi. But she still didn't understand. Since you're loyal and devoted, why did you betray him so easily? Esteemed Wang Fei is His Imperial Highness's official wife. How can this old servant be considered betraying His Imperial Highness by answering a few of your questions? Zhao Mama's words left Han Yunxi at a loss for words. She only felt that it was ironic. Zhao Mama, are you really muddle-headed or just pretending? I'm just a decoration. Do you really take me seriously? You've served His Imperial Highness for so many years, you should know that he didn't marry me willingly. Official wife. She couldn't even compare to the servants by Long Fei Ye's side. They couldn't even be considered friends, but strangers who'd made a few deals with each other. The title of official wife had brought her so much trouble. Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi's stomach was filled with anger. Zhao Mama, I'll be thankful to the heavens and earth if His Imperial Highness doesn't make trouble for me. As for official wife, he can marry whoever he wants. I'm prepared to give up my position at any time. Zhao Mama had never heard of a woman who dared to disdain His Imperial Highness so much. After all, there were so many women lining up to enter the Duke of Qin's estate that they could form a line all the way to the outskirts of the city, but this esteemed Wang Fei was so disdainful. Zhao Mama was furious. Without thinking, she said, "Esteemed Wang Fei, His Imperial Highness allowed you to stay in the hibiscus courtyard and even had this old servant serve you. How is that not taking you seriously? Moreover, Grand Concubine Yi wanted to ask His Imperial Highness for this old servant before, but he refused. Esteemed Wang Fei, don't be ignorant of your good fortune." At these words, Han Yunxi knitted her brows. Zhao Mama was startled as well and quickly fell to her knees. This servant was muddle-headed. This servant was impulsive and spoke without thinking, offending esteemed Wang Fei. May esteemed Wang Fei meet punishment. Han Yunxi's mouth twitched. She didn't know why, but her heart suddenly began to beat faster. Chapter 99. Zhao Mama knelt with her head bowed, her heart filled with fear. Even though she'd served His Highness Duke of Qin for years, a servant was still a servant. Her greatest taboo wasn't to do a bad job, but to offend her master. She'd offended esteemed Wang Fei on her first day at Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. How was she supposed to live the rest of her days? If esteemed Wang Fei complained to His Highness Duke of Qin, then things would be even worse. After all, she'd served by His Highness Duke of Qin's side for years without ever making him dissatisfied. While Zhao Mama was terrified, Han Yunxi was still in a daze. Zhao Mama's reprimanding words echoed in her ears. How did he not take you seriously? It looked like this old mama had returned so suddenly that she hadn't figured out her relationship with Long Fei Yi. She must have misunderstood something. But despite knowing it was a misunderstanding, Han Yunxi's lips still rose to a secret smile without her noticing. Cough, cough. She coughed lightly a few times before saying, "Zhao Mama, I'll let it go this time. I'll take into account that you didn't mean it on purpose. As for the relationship between His Highness and me." Han Yunxi paused before bursting into laughter. She patted Zhao Mama's shoulder and grinned. He, you'll understand in the future. Then she walked briskly into the rooms. Zhao Mama slowly raised her head and looked at Han Yunxi's retreating form. Then she recalled her words and felt that something was off. She needed to find that rascal Chu Shifeng and ask him about the details. In the dead of night, the lights in Long Fei Ye's sleeping quarters were still on. A figure silently appeared in front of the door. The guards hidden on the side had long sensed someone approaching, but none of them dared to make a sound. The newcomer was none other than Qin Wang Fei Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi had seen the lights in Long Fei Ye's sleeping quarters from a distance, so she immediately came over. But she hesitated at the door. After hesitating for a while, Han Yunxi still didn't knock on the door. She turned around to leave, but at this moment, the door suddenly moved. Han Yunxi was shocked and instinctively wanted to run away. But damn it, she accidentally missed a step and fell down. "Ah!" She cried out and immediately muffled her mouth, but it was already too late. The doors opened to reveal Long Fei standing inside, dressed in black robes that made him look like a god of the night. He looked down at her with disdainful eyes. "What are you doing?" Long Fei Ye's voice was colder than the winter wind. I. Han Yunxi was so nervous that she couldn't speak properly. However, Long Fei Ye's face was terrifyingly cold. He walked out of the door and walked past her without even looking at her. "I'll go with you to detoxify," Han Yunxi blurted out in a hurry. Before she asked Zhao Mama, she felt at ease. But after asking Zhao Mama, she felt especially guilty. After hesitating for a while, she still came. She also didn't know what she felt guilty about. Perhaps, helping him detoxify the poison was a repayment for him taking her in to stay in Hibiscus Garden and helping her solve a lot of problems. Long Fei Yi stopped and was silent for a while. Then, he asked coldly, "Why did you change your mind?" I just slept for a while. I feel much better now. I should be able to make an accurate diagnosis," Han Yunxi replied. Long Fei Ye's lips curled into a cold smile. "Unfortunately, this prince doesn't need it anymore." As he spoke, he continued to walk forward. Han Yunxi suddenly stood up. She didn't know that she had sprained her ankle, but this violent movement hurt her so much that she fell back down. She couldn't help but cry out in pain. "Aya!" Long Fei abruptly halted his steps, but it was only a moment before he started walking again. "Long Fei Yi, stop right there. I'm here to negotiate with you," Han Yunxi hurriedly blurted out. This time, Long Fei Yi really stopped in his tracks. Seeing this, Han Yunxi hurriedly said, "No matter what, I've helped you twice. You should help me once, right? If this prince remembers correctly, this prince paid the consultation fee for both times I asked you to do something." Long Fei Yi didn't turn around as he reminded her coldly. "That's why I won't treat you unfairly this time. I'll help you detoxify the poison, and you help me. We'll each take what we need and help each other," Han Yunxi said with a smile. After a long time, Long Fei Yi finally turned around to look at her. "What is it?" Han Yunxi inwardly sighed in relief. She knew that this guy still hadn't found someone to detoxify the poison. In reality, she wasn't here to make a deal with him. She just thought that he must have encountered a difficult case since he was looking for her to detoxify the poison. Moreover, he had waited for her for more than 2 hours, so he should be in a hurry. As for the deal, it was just something she thought of in a hurry. Han Yunxi wasn't afraid when she saw Long Fei Ye's icy face. She smiled apologetically and waved her hand. "Come over and talk." Long Fei Ye's lips twitched. He was clearly a bit impatient, but he still walked over and squatted down. At this time, Han Yunxi said in a low voice, "I've helped you detoxify the poison. Take me to the Han residence secretly. I want to look for something in 3rd Madame Li's room." "Be a thief." Long Fei Yi raised his brows. "No." Han Yunxi immediately denied and lowered her voice even more. "I'm investigating a case. Mu Qingwu asked me to investigate the poison. Last time, he was poisoned with 10,000 snake poison. Long Fei Yi already knew about this. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't know that he was also paying attention. "You suspect the Han family?" Long Fei Yi was a bit surprised. "It's not really a suspicion. It's just that there are some clues over there." I have to look for them to confirm it. Han Yunshi said seriously. Letting this guy know about the matter at the general's residence didn't have much of an impact. She wasn't asking for his help, but making a deal. Of course, if he wanted to take the initiative to help, she wouldn't mind. Long Fei hesitated for a moment, then said indifferently, "Go detoxify the poison first." Your Highness agrees. Han Yunshi was amused. Long Fei's face remained cold. He stood up expressionlessly. Han Yunshi wanted to stand up as well, but only then did she realize that she had sprained her ankle. She could only press her hands on the ground and stand up on one leg. As a doctor, although she wasn't from the orthopedics department, she still had some common sense. Based on the degree of pain, it didn't hurt the bone. It hurt a bit, but it wasn't a big deal. She tried to lightly step on the ground. The pain level seemed to be within an acceptable range, so it shouldn't be a problem for her to limp. She lightly exhaled and said indifferently, "Your Highness, lead the way." Long Fei glanced at her leg from the corner of his eyes, then really walked forward with large strides. Han Yunshi limped to catch up. However, not long after, her ankle hurt so much that she couldn't stand it anymore. After holding on for a while, she finally stopped. "Your Highness, wait a moment." Long Fei turned around, his cold gaze locked onto her ankle. Han Yunshi felt helpless. She thought, "I'm going to be mocked by this guy again. My leg is probably, your lordship thought your leg was made of iron." "It looks like your lordship overestimated you again," Long Fei interrupted. Han Yunshi rolled her eyes. She knew he'd laugh at her. She was about to retort when Long Fei walked over and picked her up in a princess carry. Han Yunshi was caught off guard and unconsciously wrapped her arms around Long Fei's neck. Her nose accidentally brushed against the side of his face. So cold. In an instant, Han Yunshi froze. Aside from the thumping of her heart, her entire body was stiff. Why did he suddenly, is this the legendary Princess Carrie? What is this guy doing? As if sensing the stiffness of the person in his arms, Long Fei's lips curved into a smile. It wasn't clear whether it was disdain or amusement. His feet tapped lightly on the ground, his figure strong and vigorous. He quickly disappeared into the night with Han Yunshi in his arms. At this moment, Chu Shifeng and Zhao Mama cautiously poked their heads out from the flowers on the side. They exchanged looks of disbelief. "Little Chu, didn't you say there was nothing going on between them?" What's going on?" Zhao Mama was completely lost. "I really don't know. In any case, this woman just stayed, and then. I don't know the rest," Chu Shifeng replied helplessly. "No, there. His Highness is treating her." Zhao Mama still couldn't understand. If His Highness still hadn't acknowledged this woman as Qin Wangfei and didn't fancy her, then why did he keep her here? And he even hugged her. His Highness Duke of Qin had severe misophobia. He wouldn't even be happy to shake hands with a man, much less a woman. When Chu Shifeng saw His Highness Duke of Qin take Han Yunshi in his arms for the first time, his expression was even more exaggerated than Zhao Mama's. Of course, he was at a loss now as well. "Little Chu, I'm all confused." Zhao Mama knitted her brows as her wrinkles deepened further. Chu Shifeng waved his hand. "Mama, don't worry about His Highness's matters. Go back. In the future, just be careful when serving esteemed Wangfei. Don't really treat her like a mistress." As Chu Shifeng spoke, he realized something was off and added, "But don't treat her like a mistress, either. An old woman like me doesn't understand the world of young people." Zhao Mama shook her head helplessly. When she recalled her words to esteemed Wangfei, she couldn't help but feel vexed. Unfortunately, it was too late for regrets. Esteemed Wang Fei must be laughing at me in her heart. Long Fei Yi brought Han Yunxi to a private residence hidden in a deep alley. From the outside, it looked like a house, but inside, it was Long Fei Ye's private residence called the Solitary Enclosure. As soon as they entered, Long Fei Yi placed Han Yunxi on the table and had her sit down. Han Yunxi had been so nervous the entire way that her heart was still pounding. This fellow was very tall. Even if she sat on the table, she wouldn't be as tall as him standing. She glanced up at him and asked, "Is the poison person here?" Long Fei made a sound of assent before turning to fetch some medicine. Han Yunxi could tell at a whiff that it was medicine for her sprain. At least this fellow had a conscience and knew to take care of her foot first. Han Yunxi quickly took off her shoes and socks, revealing a fair, soft, jade-like foot. Long Fei Yi saw her foot as soon as he turned around and gave a start. Then he knitted his brows and studied Han Yunxi. Did this woman have no sense of propriety at all? Did she treat other people like this too? She was a woman who had transmigrated and was also a doctor. It was normal for her to show her hands and feet. Seeing Long Fei Ye's furrowed brows, she felt that something was wrong. What was there to look at? She reached out her hand. "Give me the medicine. I'm good at massaging." However, Long Fei Ye's cold gaze slowly shifted downwards and locked onto her jade-like foot. What was he doing? Han Yunxi glanced at him before following his line of sight. Only then did she notice that her own feet were as white as jade, soft and smooth and well-proportioned. It was a beautiful sight to behold. She seemed to have suddenly realized something as she looked up at Long Fei Yi. When she saw his deep gaze, her heart suddenly thumped and she panicked. Heavens! She actually forgot that in ancient times, even showing one's arm was enough to get you married. Chapter 100. Han Yunxi recovered her senses and quickly pulled her feet back into her skirt like she had been electrocuted. When she saw Long Fei Ye's eyes again, her face instantly turned red. This fellow wouldn't think she was a loose woman, right? Or that she was seducing him. Damn! How shameful! Your Highness, this concubine can apply the medicine herself. You can leave first. Han Yunxi forced herself to calm down as she spoke. However, not only did Long Fei Yi not leave, he pulled a chair over and sat in front of her. Then he opened the ointment. Was he going to help her apply the medicine? Thinking of his gaze just now, Han Yunxi felt uncomfortable. She forced out a smile. "Your Highness, I can do it myself. Esteemed Wang Fei has already taken off her shoes and socks, so this king naturally has to help." Long Fei Ye's cold voice had a trace of ridicule. Han Yunxi felt that there was something wrong with his tone. Then again, she didn't believe that this fellow would be so kind as to personally apply the medicine for her. What if he wasn't careful and used too much strength? Wouldn't she die from the pain? "Your Highness, although we are husband and wife, but... Han Yunxi hesitated for a bit before directly saying, "Your Highness, men and women shouldn't touch each other. You should leave first." Long Fei's lips quirked up into a cold smile, his domineering gaze teasing her from head to toe. "Qin Wang Fei, are you sure you want to discuss indecent things with your lordship?" Han Yunxi inexplicably felt a little guilty, but she still replied boldly, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, you and I have a nominal relationship. I'm only a Wang Fei in name, so why can't I discuss matters of indecency with you? Please be more serious." Who would have thought that Long Fei Yi would ask back, "Han Yunxi, when did this king say you were only a Wang Fei in name? You have entered my Duke of Qin's palace, so you are one of my, Long Fei Ye's, people." As he spoke, he glanced at the shoes and socks at the side and warned coldly, "Please remember that you're already a married woman. Guard your womanly virtues well. You. Han Yunxi was angry. This guy was obviously humiliating her for not being a woman. It was just taking off her shoes and socks. Why would she think so much about it? It was him who was thinking too much and was thinking too much. Although she was angry, Han Yunxi found that she had no words to refute. Looking at Long Fei Ye's cold eyes, Han Yunxi threw caution to the wind. She stretched out her leg directly in front of Long Fei Ye, almost kicking his face. Then I'll have to trouble your highness. She said each word through gritted teeth. Long Fei Yi sat motionless, but his cold eyes were penetrating. He raised his hand to grab Han Yunxi's little foot and pulled it down forcefully. Ah! Han Yunxi cried out in pain in her heart. This guy's hand was forcefully grabbing the red and swollen part of her ankle. Following that, they heard the guard anxiously report, "Your Highness, another person died in the dungeon." At this moment, the two of them finally regained their senses. They looked at each other and immediately avoided each other. Han Yunxi lowered her head. She could not remember what was wrong with her earlier. What was she looking at him for? Long Fei Ye's brows were restrained. He lost some of his usual calmness. He pursed his lips and threw the ointment over. He said coldly, "Come out immediately after you're done. I'll wait for you at the door." As he said that, he turned around and left. His footsteps were clearly faster. She did not know if it was because the situation outside was urgent or if it was for some other reason. Han Yunxi then looked up. Seeing that he had closed the door, she heaved a huge sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. "Bastard!" she cursed. Just as her voice fell, Long Fei Yi rushed her from the door. "Han Yunxi, you better hurry up." "Bastard!" Han Yunxi cursed again. She nimbly applied the ointment and wrapped it in a layer of white gauze. She wanted to put on her shoes and socks, but she realized that the socks and boots were too complicated. The white gauze wrapped around her feet could not fit her feet at all. She hesitated for a moment. She could only use the white gauze to wrap her chilly feet tightly in several layers. This way, it would not be considered as exposing her feet, right? She had to admit that Long Fei Ye's ointment was very useful. It did not need to be applied directly on the wound. The cooling sensation was especially good, and it alleviated a lot of the pain. However, Han Yunxi did not care for it. She casually threw the ointment on the table, lightly hopped off with one foot, and limped out. Long Fei Yi glanced at her feet but did not see anything. Her skirt was very long, and when she walked, her feet were mostly hidden in the skirt. "Did the poison person die?" Han Yunxi asked. "One person died," Long Fei Yi said. He slightly squatted in front of her and was about to carry her on his back. "Come up." Han Yunxi hesitated, but Long Fei Yi was impatient. "Quick, the poison is acting up." Upon hearing this, Han Yunxi knew that he was in a hurry to detoxify the poison. She had no choice but to quickly climb up. She wrapped her arms around his neck and bent her legs. Han Yunxi was very light, so it wasn't strenuous for Long Fei to carry her on his back. Han Yunxi didn't even get to experience what it felt like to be carried on his back before his figure vanished into the darkness. He was very fast. He passed through the garden, went through the secret passage, and arrived at the dungeon in a moment. He placed Han Yunxi behind the mortuary table. Although Han Yunxi was carried here, she felt as if she had run 400 meters in a time limit. She was so anxious that she could not breathe. When she stood firm, the detoxification system's alarm sounded. Poison. Actually, even without the detoxification system's alarm, Han Yunxi could see that the corpse on the mortuary table was poisoned to death. The corpse's glabella, lips, and fingers were all black. This was the sign of death from a highly toxic poison. Han Yunshi secretly sighed before saying, "This person should have died a day or two ago, right?" Long Fei nodded and pointed to another corpse. "That one just died." Han Yunshi looked over and saw another corpse. She walked closer to take a look. The signs of poisoning had not completely appeared, but the lips were already black. She checked the corpse's eyes, lips, and fingernails. She said indifferently, "Suicide by taking poison." She didn't have the chance to take poison. Long Fei said. All of the spies he'd locked up in the dungeons were hung by their hands and feet. All of their weapons and poisons had been searched for as well. Moreover, they were locked up in individual cells with towels stuffed into their mouths to prevent them from making noise or biting off their tongues to kill themselves. Moreover, Long Fei had ordered the poison doctors to check their mouths before locking them up. They hadn't found any traces of hidden poisons. Before, Chu Shifeng had been the one interrogating them. These people had refused to say a word, eat, or drink, hoping to slowly starve to death. A few had already died in the past. But a few days ago, Long Fei had come to interrogate them personally. After torturing them, he began to discover that some of them had died from poison. There were no spies in the dungeons, so it was obvious that these people couldn't take the torture and had taken poison to death. Now Long Fei couldn't figure out where they'd gotten the poison and how they'd taken it. There were only 2 spies left. If they died one after the other, then all of his previous interrogations would have been for nothing. Han Yunshi used her needles to collect the poisoned blood from the 2 corpses as she listened to Long Fei explain the situation. She wasn't interested at first, but grew curious as soon as she heard the details. Usually, people who took poison to commit suicide would hide it in their teeth so that they'd be poisoned with a light bite. But these prisoners' mouths had all been checked before. How did they take the poison? Han Yunshi used the chance to take something out of her medical pouch to put the blood sample into her detox system. Almost immediately, the results showed that it was rice poison. It's actually all rice poison. Han Yunshi was stunned as she looked at Long Fei in disbelief. Long Fei didn't understand. Rice poison. Han Yunshi grew stern. Are there any survivors? There are 2 more, Long Fei replied honestly. Han Yunshi hesitated for a moment before seriously saying, "Take a drop of blood from each of them. Also, find a bowl of rice soup." Long Fei did as he was told. Very quickly, the blood of the 2 prisoners and a bowl of rice soup were sent in front of Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi scooped a spoonful of rice soup into the blood of one of the prisoners and silently watched. For a long time, there was no change in the blood. Long Fei didn't understand. He just looked at Han Yunshi's serious expression and didn't say anything. The 2 guards around them were very curious. What was the princess consort doing? Chapter 101. The prison cell was silent. Han Yunshi stared seriously at the rice soup in front of her. That serious expression made the curious people around her unconsciously calm down and wait with her. Long Fei's gaze fell on Han Yunshi's face. It seemed that he hadn't seen this woman's serious and professional side for a long time. If he kept her by his side as an imperial poison master, would it be a rational choice? Just as Long Fei was pondering, Han Yunshi's silent eyes suddenly lit up. She exclaimed, "Sure enough." Long Fei hurriedly looked at the rice soup. He saw that the originally white and clear rice soup suddenly became turbid and turned black in a short while. So, there's poison in their blood. Long Fei was naturally an intelligent person. He roughly understood what was going on. The rice soup wasn't poisonous. The thing that would turn the rice soup black was undoubtedly the prisoner's blood. Han Yunshi nodded, "That's right. There's poison in their blood. This poison is rice poison. What do you mean? Long Fei asked. If there was poison in their blood, how were these prisoners able to live until now? Why was it that the poison doctors he had previously hired couldn't detect any signs of poisoning? Although he didn't understand poison, Long Fei also knew that once the poison spread into the blood, the degree of poisoning wouldn't be considered light. It might even be untreatable. Just now, he had ordered someone to take blood from the prisoner's fingers. It was just a few drops of blood. Just by testing it, it was poisonous. This poison had probably completely spread throughout the prisoner's blood. Their blood was poisonous, but they were still like normal people. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Long Fei might not have believed it. This is a very special kind of poison. The reason why it's called rice poison is because this kind of poison will only appear when it comes into contact with rice. Han Yunshi paused for a moment before continuing. If I didn't guess wrongly, these poisoned people must have drunk rice soup before they were poisoned. Long Fei immediately looked at the guard beside him. Reporting to Your Highness, it is indeed so. The 3 meals in the prison are rice soup, and they are all forced to drink it. Some will drink it, and some will spit it out after a small mouthful. The guard quickly reported. In other words, if they don't eat food related to rice, they will never be poisoned. Long Fei asked seriously. Han Yunshi nodded. That's right. They'll never be poisoned. No matter how good a poison doctor is, he won't be able to detect any poison in their blood. As she spoke, she casually poured the rice soup into another cup of blood. Not long after, the same thing happened. The white rice soup gradually turned black. There was no doubt that both prisoners had poison in their blood. I see. Long Fei's lips curled into a sneer. Those who studied poisons were few and far between. Even Cloud Realm Medical Academy didn't treat poisons as a main course of study, so there shouldn't be many poison experts on this continent. What kind of person was hiding behind these moles? Was this person in northernly country, or was she hiding in Tianning's capital city like the moles? These moles were all women, so could the person behind them be a woman as well? If she didn't have the help of the detox system, would she lose in a contest? The more Han Yunshi thought about it, the more curious she became. She really wanted to meet the leader behind the scenes. Seeing Long Fei walk towards the depths of the prison, she hesitated for a moment before limping after him. Han Yunshi entered the room and saw that the prisoners hadn't been brought in yet. The guards were still preparing the torture tools. Long Fei sat in a corner, the dim light of the flames covering his face. He was like a ruler hidden in the shadows, observing all things in the world. Mysterious, stern, dignified, and arrogant, domineering, his brows filled with arrogance. In white, he looked like an immortal, but in black, he was a devil. Han Yunshi stood on one leg, unable to tear her eyes away. This man was only a few steps away from her, but he seemed to be far away from her. Long Fei glanced at her without a word. He lifted his chin slightly, indicating that there was a seat not far to her right. Han Yunshi didn't speak either, but nodded and limped over. As soon as she sat down, she felt as if her legs had been freed. As soon as she sat down, Han Yunshi noticed that there weren't any torture tools in the torture room, only a large iron cage. The iron mesh was dense and solid, and there was a circular opening on the side. It was about the size of a normal person's face. Was this the torture tool? Han Yunshi thought for a long time, but couldn't figure out how to use it. She couldn't figure out how it could be more terrible than the rice poison. Very soon, the guard brought in a rat cage. Inside was a terrifying black rat. Its head and tail were as long as an adult's arm, and its mouth was especially sharp. Han Yunshi couldn't figure out what this rat was used for, but after looking at it a few times, she couldn't help shivering as her hairs stood on end. It seemed like even the guard was afraid of this black rat, not daring to use his hands to grab it. Instead, he opened the rat cage and threw the black rat into the large iron cage, closing the opening of the large iron cage. When the large black rat fell into the large iron cage, it immediately ran around like it was crazy. It seemed like it had been locked up for a long time and hadn't moved for a long time, but it also seemed like it wanted to escape from the iron cage. In short, this rat was very excited. Han Yunxi grew more and more bewildered as she watched. At this moment, a guard tossed a piece of raw meat the size of a thumb into the rat's back. But the rat had a keen sense of smell and immediately turned to pounce on the meat, swallowing it whole in one gulp. It didn't even chomp down. Han Yunxi unconsciously sat up straight and said in a shocked voice, "This rat was raised with raw meat." Long Fei Yi didn't reply and the guard respectfully said, reporting to the princess consort, "Yes." Han Yunxi immediately understood what was going on. She couldn't help quivering as she hugged her arms tightly. It was too terrifying. This rat that ate meat had clearly been hungry for several days. It was so hungry that it jumped up and down to find food. Moreover, it should have entered this iron cage several times. It knew that once it came in, it would have meat to eat, so it ran around excitedly. If Long Fei Yi locked the prisoners in this iron cage, then wouldn't that be? Han Yunxi didn't dare to think about it and unconsciously turned to look at Long Fei Yi. She only saw Long Fei Yi's expressionless face and his eyes were cold and emotionless, just like an azura in the night. This kind of torture was even more terrifying than the rice poison. Facing this kind of torture, would anyone not confess? Very quickly, the two female prisoners were brought over. Their hands were tied behind their backs and their hair was disheveled. They looked withered and it was estimated that they had been hungry for several days. One of the female prisoners was brought to the side and tied up while the other was brought to the side of the iron cage. When the towel in her mouth was removed, she angrily shouted at Long Fei Yi, "Long Fei Yi, don't waste your energy. Even if I die, I will never answer any of your questions. I advise you to stop wasting your energy. It's useless." Long Fei Yi's lips curled into a mocking smile. He didn't reply and gave a sharp look to the guard to bring the female prisoner over. The female prisoner's head fiercely hit the iron cage. When the big black rat smelled the scent of food, it suddenly jumped out from the inside. Its sharp claws crazily scratched the iron mesh as if it wanted to tear the iron mesh apart. Han Yunxi was frightened out of her wits. If it wasn't for the iron mesh, who knew how badly the female prisoner's head would have been scratched? The hungry big rat didn't care who you were. As long as there was meat, it would definitely eat it. The female prisoner seemed to have realized that the torture this time was different from the previous ones. She struggled fiercely but the guard grabbed her neck tightly and pressed her head against the iron mesh. The female prisoner roared loudly, "Long Fei Yi, abusing a woman, are you still a man? If you have the ability, kill me." Long Fei Yi, did you hear that? You're a cold-blooded and heartless thing. You're not human. What kind of hero are you? If you have the guts, kill me. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. The guard suddenly pulled the female prisoner away and used a towel to gag her mouth. The room immediately quietened down. At this moment, Long Fei Yi slowly opened his mouth. His voice was so cold that it caused the surrounding temperature to drop by several degrees. All these years, more than 10 people have died by your hands, including a 6-year-old child and an infant in swaddling clothes. Are you worthy to talk to this prince about being a man? Han Yunxi originally had some sympathy for this female prisoner, but when she heard Long Fei Yi's words, she was furious. These traitors, forget about the shady business they didn't even let off a child. It was simply too abominable. She deserved this day. The female prisoner unhappily struggled to turn her head. However, Long Fei Yi said coldly, "Carry out the punishment." Carry out the punishment. Were they throwing people in there? Or... Chapter 102. Han Yunxi thought that the guard would throw the female prisoner into the iron cage to let the carnivorous rats gnaw on her, but the result was totally out of her expectations. Even the female prisoner herself had not expected it to turn out like this. The guard grabbed the female prisoner and pushed her to the side of the iron cage and deftly opened that little window which was the size of a human face. Before the carnivorous rats pounced over, he grabbed the female prisoner's head and actually used her head to block that little window. Heavens! Han Yunxi instantly sucked in a breath of cold air as she realized in hindsight that the outcome of offending Long Fei Yi was so terrifying. The moment the female prisoner's head blocked that little window, the starving carnivorous rats instantly pounced over and its hind legs grabbed onto the iron cage to stabilize its body. Its front claws were like iron hooks as it pierced through the female prisoner's hair and hooked onto her skull. Its sharp mouth revealed its fangs as it bit down on the female prisoner's head. Woo woo, woo woo woo. Of course the female prisoner knew what was happening at the back of her head. Her face was deathly pale and her eyes were opened wide like copper bells, filled with fear. She struggled with all her might and used all her strength to move her body. Her mouth, which was blocked, let out a whimper as if she was begging for mercy. Long Fei Yi did not bother about her, but the female prisoner kept on sobbing as she looked towards Long Fei Yi. Her terrified eyes revealed an obvious pleading look. Anyone could tell that she was begging for mercy. At this moment, Long Fei Yi gently raised his hand and the guard threw a piece of meat into the iron cage. The carnivorous rats immediately changed their target and let go of the female prisoner's head as they pounced towards that piece of meat. The guard immediately used this opportunity to pull the female prisoner away and closed the little window. The female prisoner closed her eyes and her legs went soft as she sat on the ground paralyzed. She seemed to have lost all her strength as she was so frightened that she was shivering and had yet to recover from the shock. Han Yunxi's brows were tightly knitted as she looked towards the back of her head. All she saw was that her long hair was messy and her flesh was badly mutilated. She then looked towards that big rat in the iron cage and instantly felt disgusted and didn't want to look at it any longer. "Now, can you decide whether you want to write out the list of names?" Long Fei Yi asked. What he wanted was the list of names of all the traitors. Once he obtained this game in Northernly Country would be completely over. The female prisoner lowered her head and didn't move. Not sure if she was scared silly, or at least in Han Yunxi's view, she was scared silly. However, the facts proved that Han Yunxi had underestimated this group of traitors. After a while, the woman slowly raised her head. She had been pleading with Long Fei just then, but now she was glaring fiercely at him. She turned her head away and refused to answer his question. Why did she just whimper and beg for mercy? Han Yunxi knitted her brows. She couldn't appreciate people like him. Long Fei Yi didn't have such good patience. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Continue." The guard immediately pulled the female prisoner up. A trace of fear flashed through the female prisoner's eyes, but she didn't beg for mercy. She thought that Long Fei Yi only had 2 people left in his hands. He wouldn't let them die so easily. As long as she survived this disaster, everything would be fine. But who knew that this time, the guard didn't use her head to block the small window of the iron cage. Instead, he pulled her over and let her face the small window. No, the female prisoner immediately understood what the guard wanted to do. She roared in her heart and widened her eyes. No, this was letting the carnivorous rat gnaw on her face. She regretted it now. She struggled violently like she'd gone mad, sobbing and sobbing as tears streamed down her face. But this time, Long Fei didn't tell her to stop. He really wanted her to die. Bang! A loud sound was heard. The guard grabbed her and slammed her face against the small window. Her face was pressed against the small window, facing the big rat directly. At this moment, that big rat was still gnawing on the meat that the guard had thrown over. It was eagerly chewing on the meat, and at the same time, it didn't forget to glance over. Woo woo. Woo woo. The female prisoner tried to shake her head and retreat, but it was to no avail. The guard held her tightly. Finally, the big rat finished eating the meat that the guard had thrown over. It slowly turned around and faced her face. Woo! The female prisoner was so frightened that her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Soon, the large, carnivorous rat pounced on her. Han Yunxi turned her head away, not daring to look. But very soon, she heard the sound of cruel biting. Long Fei Ye's eyes were ice-cold and ruthless. He slowly turned his head towards the other female prisoner who was tied up and asked coldly, "What about you?" Han Yunxi then recalled that there was another female prisoner by the side and was suddenly enlightened. Long Fei Yi had originally intended to kill that person. He was killing the chicken to warn the monkey. The person he really wanted to interrogate was that female prisoner who was tied up by the side. Looking at this man's cold and handsome side profile, Han Yunxi suddenly felt that he was just like a wolf. Towards his enemies, he was always so calm, decisive and even cruel. At this moment, that female prisoner was looking at her companion in horror. She had never thought that Long Fei Yi would kill her companion. It must be known that Long Fei Yi had only caught the two of them. Once they died, Long Fei Yi's clues would all be cut off. Previously, wasn't Long Fei Yi very worried that they would die? He had even found a poison doctor to investigate why one of them had suddenly died from poison. But why was he so ruthless this time? Seeing that the female prisoner had no reaction, Long Fei Yi gave a look to the guard to remove the towel from the female prisoner's mouth. The female prisoner suddenly shouted fiercely, "Long Fei Yi, if you have the guts, then kill me too. I will not surrender." Long Fei Yi's lips hooked up into a sneer. He stood up languidly and walked towards the iron cage step by step. A trace of worry flashed across the female prisoner's eyes. Her gaze followed closely only to see Long Fei Yi suddenly pull away the female prisoner whose face was stuck to the iron cage and throw her to the ground. The carnivorous rat seemed to be very afraid of Long Fei Yi and immediately hid far away, not daring to chase after him. But that female prisoner fell to the ground with her 4 feet in the air. Her face was completely disfigured, but she did not die. Even if her entire face was bitten to pieces, she would still not die. She could not stop trembling. Her facial features were almost shattered and her mouth had been bitten to a pulp, making her unable to speak. Long Fei Yi then raised his head to look at the female prisoner who was tied to the side. He sneered, "This king will not kill you, but I will definitely make you suffer a fate worse than death." As he said that, Ling ordered, "Men, bring her to a doctor to apply medicine. Continue the torture after her injuries have healed." Next. No. The female prisoner who was tied up could not help but spit out. Having witnessed her companion being tortured, she was very clear of the horror of this rat torture. She admitted that she did not dare to face it. Not to mention facing it, just thinking about it made her hair stand on end. "It's not too late for you to regret it now," Long Fei Yi reminded her. The female prisoner did not think much and was very excited. "I agree." She agreed so quickly. Han Yunxi was feeling puzzled. Who knew that the female prisoner would say again, "Long Fei Yi, I agree. But please let me eat my fill first and calm down my emotions." After starving for several days and nights, she did not have any strength left. Since she was going to confess, it was very normal for her to ask for a meal first. If Han Yunxi had not solved the mystery of the rice poison, perhaps Long Fei Yi would agree. But the female prisoner did not know that the reason why Long Fei Yi would make such a big fuss today, risking the risk of torturing someone to death to interrogate her, was because he knew the secret of the rice poison. Once a prisoner was interrogated to the point that she had the intention to commit suicide, but she could not die, then she could only confess. Rice? Long Fei Yi laughed. Do you think that this king will help you to take poison to commit suicide? Once these words were said, the female prisoner's expression changed. Long Fei Yi said this. Could it be that he already knew about the existence of the rice poison? No, this was absolutely impossible. Their master's method of poisoning was so secretive, and the rice poison was an ancient poison. There were very few people who knew about it, so how did Long Fei Yi know about it? The female prisoner looked at Long Fei Yi in disbelief. Long Fei Yi did not have the patience to waste time with her. Men, carry out the punishment. She would not die, slowly torture her. If she did not confess the first time, or the second time, she would definitely confess the third time. If she wanted to die, she could only wait for a few days and starve to death. But before she starved to death, the torture that she had to endure was unimaginable. Very quickly, the guards escorted the female prisoner over. The female prisoner's beautiful face turned pale as her heart trembled with fear. Her legs went soft and she could not even walk. When she walked past her companion and saw her face from a close distance, she was instantly scared out of her wits as she fiercely closed her eyes and exclaimed, "I promise. Long Fei Yi, I promise you." If she did not confess, before she starved to death, how many times would she have to endure the rat torture? No, she could not take it, not even once. If she could not take the poison and die, she could not endure until she died. Give her a brush and paper. Long Fei Yi said as he sat back down, his entire body emanating a domineering aura that could not be defied. The female prisoner trembled. I don't know who the accomplices are, we don't even know each other. Long Fei Yi laughed. It was very, very light, but it was especially frightening in the silent prison cell. I only know who we have to kill in the next 3 years. I really don't know anything else, the female prisoner hastily confessed. Seeing the female prisoner so frightened, it didn't seem like she was lying. The guards quickly brought over a brush and paper. The female prisoner's hand trembled as she held the brush. After a long time, she finally wrote down a list of names. I only know about these 20 people. I really don't know about the others. Her voice was choked with sobs as tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. Long Fei Yi took a look and seemed to see something. A complicated look flashed through his eyes, but he did not show it. Coldly, he asked, "Who is your master in Northernly Country? Is he also hiding in Tianning?" For such a secretive organization of spies to hide in Tianning country for 3 to 4 years, or even longer, the mastermind behind this was definitely not an ordinary person. I don't know. The female prisoner blurted out, then hurriedly explained, "We only listen to the captain. I've only seen the captain, but I've never seen the higher-ups." This kind of organization was very similar to a spy organization. Even if the people below were discovered and tortured, they still wouldn't betray the higher-ups. Who's your captain? Long Fei Yi asked with interest. She's called Sister Mosquito. She died at your hands not long ago, the female prisoner replied truthfully. She paused, then added, she can control poisonous mosquito swarms. At these words, Long Fei Yi finally remembered. So it was the female spy who controlled the poisonous mosquitoes. He really didn't expect her to be the captain of these female spies. If he hadn't been afraid of accidents happening in the valley, he wouldn't have killed that woman so quickly. Long Fei-yi interrogated the female prisoner a few more questions before he stood up and indicated for the guards to take her away and continue to imprison her. Han Yunqi saw everything and remained silent. She only secretly sighed in relief. Such a cruel thing had finally passed. At this time, Long Fei-yi handed over the list of names, a playful look in his eyes. Take a look.